the Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee for Part 1. Our first item is Creative Hub. We have one delegation, but before the delegation, I think it would be helpful to have the staff present. I know you've allocated 10 minutes, but obviously in the interest of time and knowing that we are running behind schedule, as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of committee. If you'll recall, in May, you directed staff to proceed with community engagement on the Creative Hub initiative, and we're excited to bring those results to you today, and as well as provide our recommendations for moving forward. So Ms. DiDonato and Mrs. Robson will walk you through what they have heard from the community, and then I'll speak to the recommendations, and we'll take questions from there.
Thank you. Through the chair, we're starting off to talk about this initiative because it has been recommended as part of our economic development strategy in Make It Kitchener. You'll recall that the recommendation there is to establish a creative hub for artists and to develop an opportunity for growing and strengthening that sector. Supporting the sector is a significant opportunity for an economic group that is actually showing growth potential that outpaces some of the other economic groups as well. We find a way then to take this opportunity in creative industries through a chance for growth, a way to raise the representation in the community, to drive innovation across other sectors. A competitive advantage for the creative industry and the arts is that we have an opportunity to use the content and experiences for both the digital and the manufacturing sector. The momentum in the economic sector now actually has a high rate of entrepreneurship and is ready to take forward the ways that we can assist the practitioners to grow their own businesses and to work together on a project-based environment that actually grows further. Added to that, we have talent being developed at post-secondary education institutions such as Conestoga College's new animation school, opportunities for the growing film production school at Wilfrid Laurier, as well as the collaboration with University of Waterloo in the Games Institute and the Critical Media Lab. The economic trends and community strength inform the direction, but consulting with the community is how we found out exactly how a creative hub might help. And for that, I turn it over to Ms. Robson.
So in terms of the purpose of the stakeholder engagement as it relates to this project, the development of a creative hub, we really had two goals, which was to, one, define the role and function of a creative hub in Kitchener, and secondly, to articulate the space requirements and locational preferences for such a hub. In terms of the process that we followed, over the summer we gave tours of potential buildings. We hosted 3 events between the months of July and October, which had approximately 300 participants. And the participants for these events were representing a variety of disciplines and areas of activity, such as artists, creative practitioners, arts organizations, funders, developers, and other community organizations. In terms of the findings, one of the things that we heard was about the mission or the function of a creative hub. And it's really about supporting the career and business development of those in the creative industries. So a working kind of mission or statement of function that we've been developing is the role of the creative hub is to facilitate the career success of those engaged in the creative industries by expanding the capacity for entrepreneurship, creation, networking, and collaboration. Furthermore, who we heard would be the beneficiaries and some of the folks engaged in creative industries who would benefit from this type of endeavor are those working in film, music, theater, graphics, user experience design, interactive media, visual artists, and other supporting organizations. These were identified as the primary users, but not exclusively the users of such an endeavor. In terms of what could be provided at a creative hub, from the consultation we heard that there's a need for support in entrepreneurial services for those in the creative industries, a need for space for networking, hosting events, workshops, and other classroom activities, a need for flexible rehearsal and performance space, as well as other specialized uses such as studio spaces for visual arts, sound and video recording, and multimedia. We also heard that there is a recognition and a need for a compatible commercial tenant at an arts hub. And that could be something like a cafe or other type of retail endeavor that could support the activities going on at the hub and also provide a location for people to bump into each other and to plan their next projects. What we then did was look at the results from our from our stakeholder engagement events, and then also looked at best practices nationally and internationally, and looked at the types of spaces in terms of requirements for square footage that might be allocated to the uses I just described. So the space allocations are really just a range and a starting point for understanding how we might meet the needs expressed. So in a centrally located hub, we might have uses such as you see before you to support entrepreneurial service and professional development, such as shared offices, shared reception and workspaces, as well as a networking of an event in classroom space. We also then at the two next items on this table show short-term rental space and commercial tenant space. And this would be a revenue generating activity for the Creative Hub where these spaces could be rented out to users. It's also worth noting that while we see these uses being incorporated in a central hub, there were also some specialized needs for space that we envision being available in a other site. So for example, there's a need for a professional stage theater and also a need for a commercial film soundstage. We've determined that these could maybe be met elsewhere, and that the reason for that is that the square footage is quite significant, 7,000 to 10,000 for each of those. And so we'd like to take these requirements forward into our action planning, Arts and Culture Action Plan for 2017 to determine how else these could be met. I think it's also worth noting here that while this example of space provides some context for decision making and for thinking about a creative hub, it's worth noting that the demand for space here and in other examples of creative hubs varies quite a bit. We saw examples from as little as 10,000 square feet to as much as 150,000 square feet. So we believe this can be as an initial creative hub, but that we do believe the growth potential is quite significant.
For the next step in the consultation, we looked at the location. Once we knew the kind of needs that were estimated, the kinds of activities that might happen in a hub to incubate and accelerate, some of the location requirements figured in to the needs of the community. And they let us know, for example, that it would have to be a space where the requirements for activities would fit. Also, that it be centrally located. It's important to consider this, at least the initial part of the Creative Hub, as being a nucleus to a framework of existing and future arts facilities that will need to connect throughout the city. Also, that the location have a sense of stability and a possibility for growth in place. There's a significant momentum in the industry, and having immediate availability will also help us to leverage that momentum to grow quickly and have the activities begin immediately. And of course, the space would have to be accessible. And for the next part, I hand it off to Mr. Bloom.
So when we looked at all of the sites that were suggested throughout the consultation, really two sites rose above all the others, 48 Ontario Street and 44 Gaukel Street. And then when we looked more closely at those two sites, it became clear and obvious to us that 44 Gaukel Street was the most ideal location to start as a location for the Creative Hub, largely due to the ability for us to mobilize that sooner, and the scale of renovations required there made a lot more sense. And it also provides the opportunities to expand in the future that we think are greater on this site. So having said that, there's a series of recommendations in the report in front of you. The first one really just, I think, brings to foundation that there is a tremendous opportunity to develop a creative hub, and its growth potential is significant, and that as the city we stand by and we support that opportunity. Number two is that we recommend that 44 Gaukel Street be the preferred initial location that we explore the opportunity of a hub being located at. And to get there, number 3, which is that we initiate an expression of interest process to allow prospective occupiers to put forward proposals to be the operator of a creative hub at that location. At the same time, we're recommending that on number 4, that 48 Ontario Street be declared as surplus and brought forward simultaneously for a request for proposals process, really for 2 main reasons. Number 1, I think the community has expressed explicitly that they don't want to see the building continue to remain empty, and they want to see that the heritage attributes of the building be preserved sooner rather than later. And proceeding with that gives that an opportunity to happen. It also doesn't preclude somebody who was interested in proposing a creative hub at that location from doing so. They could, as part of that RFP process, put in a bid to acquire and convert that building accordingly. Number 5 suggests that the net proceeds from the sale of 48 Ontario Street be allocated to support the development of the creative hub. And then number 6 really suggests that we think that there's great long-term growth potential for Creative Hub beyond just what we've articulated today, and that staff continue to explore those over the medium and long-term horizons. So with that, we're here to answer any questions you've got.
Thank you. Thank you for being quick. I have Councillor Etherington, Fernandez, Ioannidis, Davey, Galloway, Seelock in that order to ask questions of staff, I'm assuming. So I'm going to have the delegation come first, so you'll have opportunity to ask staff. So I've noted that order down, so that's the order that I will take the questions when we have opportunity to ask questions of staff. So if I can have James Howe come up for your delegation. Hi, James. As you know, you have 5 minutes to make your presentation.
Yes. I've given this matter a lot of thought over the weekend. My thinking has evolved and changed over time. And I'm not entirely settled on exactly what to say yet, but here's what I do know. As a strong art supporter who has been a long-time proponent of a arts hub or creative hub, if you like, we have selected a location, and I think we should move ahead with 44 Gaukel as a location. That comes partly because I know a number of people in the arts community have said that that's what they would like to see, and I can certainly support that. Although I'm not entirely convinced that it's as move-in ready as the report alludes to. But let's stop dilly-dallying. Let's move forward. Let's have a creative hub. Let's have it at 44 Gaukel. I also know that it's in the best interest of 48 Ontario Street North to be occupied and used as soon as possible. If the city does not have any short-term or long-term use for the property, then it should be sold. I've said that before. I'm saying that now. I'm saying that now because the other thing I know is that it's premature to decide to vote to sell 48 Ontario Street North. I'm saying that because when I stood here in June, I stood here and suggested that we separate consultations on the future of 48 Ontario Street from the Creative Hub. And I thought that was necessary, partly because I thought we may end up in this kind of place. And having been an active participant, having been one of those 300 people, having been to a couple of public events, I can say that this report does not have any mandate to recommend the sale of 48 Ontario Street North. 2 of the 3 options recommended selling it. At no time in the consultation process were people asked if we should be selling 48 Ontario Street North. And this is despite the fact that the Friends of 48 Ontario Street North, which I'm an organizer of, held a Doors Open event there that 344 people attended. 3 times, at least, we suggested to staff to use it as a consultation on the future of the building. For myself, twice, I never even got a response. Actually, one time I did from the Director of Development, who referred it to another staff member who I never heard from. So I don't want to do anything that delays 48 Ontario Street North being occupied, but I do not believe that this report has the mandate to recommend the sale and to link the sale to the Creative Hub. And that's because not only has there's been no consultation, but the city has not actually looked at, as far as I know, whether there are other possible uses. An arts hub was only one possible use. Leasing the building and using it in some other way is a possible use. The Friends of 48 Ontario Street North, we did ask at Doors Open what should be used at the building. An arts hub was a common answer. Other arts uses were a common answer. We also had people suggesting bars, restaurants, using it as a music venue, having it as tech offices, having it as social housing, having it as loss. So, you know, we have some of that information. There are other possibilities. I don't think this is the time to be making that decision because I don't think the city has determined whether it has short-term or long-term uses for that building.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. There is a question for you, Councillor Zola.
I was really lining up for questions to staff, but no, while I'm there, I do have a question. I wondered, were you expecting there to be some public engagement on dealing with 48 Ontario Street?
Absolutely.
And do you think there should be some public engagement on that as to what happens to it?
Well, before June, I probably would not have pushed for public engagement on whether to sell it or not, but staff brought forward a recommendation to council to have consultations. The options that we're supposed to be consulted on, 2 of them were looking at the sale of the property. I would then expect to be consulted on those options directly. And 48 Ontario Street was considered as an arts hub, but it was only considered as an arts hub as one of number of possible locations, all of which were treated equally.
Thank you for your answer. Thanks.
Councillor Etherington.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just had one question for James, but I just want to take this opportunity that when we get to that point, I'd be prepared to move these recommendations. This would put the hub in my ward. But my question to James would be...
I think it's fine in Ward 10, Councillor.
You do? Well, we have a difference of opinion there. But anyway, my question has to do with heritage. How would you, in your opinion, how would you safeguard the heritage qualities of the Legion building?
Well, I think Council has already taken a very important step of publishing its intent to designate the property, and I think that's great. And I think, you know, the idea of selling it through, if it's being sold through an RFP to basically a heritage-friendly developer is an excellent approach. So I'm not opposed to the sale. I just don't think that it's appropriate that the sale be linked, especially it's almost as if there was an assumption by staff that if it was not used as a hub, that it could be sold to fund a hub. As a citizen of Kitchener, even though I'm a March supporter, I don't think that link has been established.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Your point's well taken. I guess the part that I don't understand, maybe you can help me out, is being that if it does go for sale, and being that the future owner will have to respect the heritage requirements of the building, and being that many of the ideas that you put out, a bar, tech offices, etc., would most likely be the eventual use of the site. What are your fears in having it in private ownership as opposed to public?
I don't have fears, especially if it's sold as described to a heritage-friendly developer. I'm not opposed to the sale. I've called for the sale many times. They've referred to, certainly me as the public, as saying that the building should not be empty. So I'm not necessarily opposed to that. What I'm opposed to right now is I think it's premature to sell a building after consultations that never considered whether the city should be doing that, even though there were options on the table that very specifically called for that.
Okay, and I guess I just struggle because, again, we'll hear from staff, but one of the parts of that actual engagement was selling the building.
No.
No.
I wasn't at one of the sessions because I wasn't even considered a stakeholder. I wasn't notified of it. I had to ask to be on the list, saying that I had an independent interest in a creative hub, in establishing one. There was no consultation that was specifically asked people whether 48 Ontario Street should be sold, whether there were any other possible uses for it, whether it should be sold to fund a creative hub. None of those questions were asked. So I don't know how you can conclude that it should be sold as part of the consultation process report.
Okay, thanks. We'll get some clarification from staff, but I recall it being one of the options in the consultation. If it was sold, the proceeds would go to the Arts Hub, but we'll talk to staff with that. Thank you.
Councillor Etherington, you've rung back in. Did you have a question again of the delegation? That's okay. I'm going to, James, that's all the questions for you. Thank you for coming before us. It's appreciated. As I already said, I was taking note just because everyone had rung back in. Again, it's Councillor Etherington, Fernandez, Ioannidis, Davey, Galloway Seelock, and Councillor Gazzola. So I'm going to follow the list as I had said. So, Councillor Etherington, if you want to ring in. Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, question to Corey. Corey, in relation to number 5 on your recommendation, how do we ensure that the entire proceeds from the sale of the Legion building go toward helping to pay for a future arts hub? How are we going to do that?
Go ahead, Corey.
I guess I'm saying, how do you guarantee that?
Through the chair, our recommendation to council is that the proceeds would go to the Economic Development Reserve and they would sit there for council's future use, and then ultimately becomes council's decision on how to direct that funding accordingly. Certainly at this point we don't know exactly how much funding is going to be required to support a creative hub at 44 Gaukel. That will come out through the expression of interest process. But the initial suggestion is that essentially the money be directed to the reserve and then council will decide later.
And you're talking about the entire amount?
That's our recommendation currently, yes.
Okay, and my other question is your use of medium to long-term opportunities in number 6. If in the near future the Gaukel Street building is sold because it's a multi-million-dollar site, where would you see the hub going? Would it stay there in some other building, or would it be moved elsewhere? Do you have any idea on that?
Through the chair, ultimately that would be the direction of council. I think our intention, if council's direction was ever to sell that building, that if we're making a commitment to the hub, that we explore every avenue for the hub to remain in that site and in that location. And failing that, we'd have to consider other options.
Thank you.
Councillor Fernandez, you want to ring in? You're next. Go ahead.
Thank you. So, a couple of questions regarding the process of our report. how much of the report was done by staff and how much of it was done by a consultant?
Just stay rung in, okay? That'll be easier. Sylvia?
Through the chair, the report was written by staff as well as the background appendix, and the consultants created a summary of the findings based on the consultation events themselves.
I didn't hear that first word.
The consultants created the summary of the findings from the consultation itself.
And can you tell me how much that cost us?
In total, I believe it was under $15,000.
Under 15?
Yes.
Okay. What about, let me just backtrack a little bit. So we just heard that from Mr. Bloom that the entire proceeds of 48 Ontario Street would go into the Economic Development Reserve to be earmarked for a creative hub. How can you, so let's just say it takes a year before 48 Gaukel or Ontario is sold, and we don't get a leaser who's interested in 44 Gaukel. We've got that money sitting there. What's to say that it doesn't get chipped away for other projects?
Corey?
Through the chair, I believe council's policy, and Mr. Chapman may correct me if I'm wrong, but that the sale of downtown lands, right now, council's policy is that sale of downtown lands, that the proceeds be directed to the Economic Development Reserve for future use to support economic development initiatives. And ultimately, on a face value, that's essentially what you'd be doing, and then council would be directing staff accordingly through budget processes on how they would want that those dollars utilized.
And I agree with you. You're right. But there are all kinds of other economic development initiatives that come out of the Make It Kitchener strategy that it could be used for. So I really want to make sure, because I'm concerned that if that money gets frittered away on other initiatives, then all of a sudden we're going to be faced with additional costs. First of all, capital costs to set that hub up, which we don't know yet what that will be. Second of all, additional operational costs, because what happens if the leaser is not prepared to cover the full cost? If we looked at that, if we looked at the cost of operating that building and alterations that would be involved.
Through the chair, I guess the comment that I would make is, based on this recommendation, if there were proceeds from the sale of 48 Ontario directed to the reserve, staff would not utilize those funds for any other purpose other than that, until such time as council directs us otherwise.
Okay. So on page 7 of the report, I noticed that there was some numbers here on a graph. And you have Quebec City, Halifax, Winnipeg, a number of other cities, Surrey, Brampton. I'm looking at the percentages of artists that are in some of these cities with a significantly higher population than we as a city of Kitchener. Never mind, you've combined the 3 cities, Waterloo and Cambridge. Where did you come up with these numbers? Where did you come up with the 70.72% in Quebec City are artists and the rest are cultural workers?
I will have to put somebody out of queue first. Go ahead.
Through the chair, the numbers that you see before you came from work that was done through Stats Canada data by Kelly Hill. This is from 2015. So this was looking at census areas based on the 2011 National Household Survey. And he was looking at the percentage of artists as a percentage of the overall workforce, as well as cultural workers.
Okay, thank you. I want to know how once we have this creative hub, how are we not going to be competing with all of the other initiatives and groups. So, for example, today we heard the museum, and they're talking about their makerspace, and they're talking about some digital work that they're doing. KPL came before us last week and talked about some digital media work that they're doing. The Courtyard is doing some rehearsal space, and who knows what else they're doing. The Registry Theatre has rehearsal space and does musical performance and other productions. How are we going to make sure that one is not undercutting the other? I mean, competition is good in the marketplace for some businesses, but I wouldn't think it would be necessarily good in this particular industry.
Through the chair, I think what we've heard through the consultation is that there are gaps in the offerings out there that for the creative industry, especially around the entrepreneurship side and the services really to advance business growth. So I suggest that what we would look for in the expression of interest on any proposals is, are they addressing the gaps? And that would be something that we would be assessing each proposal based on.
Okay, I see I'm out of time, but I do have another question.
Swing back in, yep. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Chair Singh. My question is with regards to the sale of 48 Ontario Street. What, with the RFP, what would we put any clauses in the RFP to ensure that we have respect for the heritage component of the property?
Through the chair, that to me, based on the forthcoming potential designation of that building, to me that will be a mandatory item that council could refuse any application that did not speak to those aspects.
Okay, so we would not add any other further not restrictions, but items to it?
Through the chair, typically what, beyond heritage aspects, typically what we would do is articulate, based on existing policy documents that council has approved, whether that's the official plan, Part Central, Make It Kitchener strategy, etc., we would articulate the kind of outcomes that council would like to see come out of any proposal, and then weigh the proposals based on those policies.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. First, a question, like a broader question in terms of the Arts Hub and Creative Hub, I should say. It seems in this instance we're sort of going this alone in terms of the City of Kitchener. The route that we're going down, have we considered, or is it too late, or will we in the future consider engaging other local municipalities about interests in this initiative? And before you answer, I guess my concern somewhat in looking at Make It Kitchener, which I'm a huge supporter of, make no mistake, but in terms of going too many of these things alone, if we have, we have Communitech, if we have the Art Creative Hub in Kitchener, if we have the manufacturing incubator in Kitchener, the danger is that what happens if Waterloo, do we want duplication? Do we want a manufacturing incubator in Waterloo and or Cambridge is in our best interests? So could you comment on that briefly?
Through the chair, maybe just globally and not specifically on this issue, I think ultimately in any of those instances we're looking for opportunities to serve a need that isn't being serviced somewhere else in the region and to avoid duplication. And I think in most instances if there's an opportunity to partner, whether that be with another municipality or another agency, that we would always seek out those opportunities.
So if, for example, between now and when we deal with it, if Cambridge came out and said, we really think we want to have an advanced manufacturing hub, we would engage in discussions with them before we would go ahead.
Through the chair, yeah, I think we would assess if we were looking at some type of manufacturing-based incubator, we would want to make sure that what we're providing either doesn't compete directly, either there's room in the market for two, or we would be providing something different than what theirs would be providing.
Okay, very good. So my next question is going to be about the recommendation, specifically item number 5. And I'm not sure, this might be a question of the clerk, but the way it reads right now, would we need a motion to reconsider, if it's approved at council, to not use the funds in whole or in part for something other than the Creative Hub? I can repeat the question. Sure. So number 5, the way it's written, it reads as if it gets approved at council that whatever we sell Ontario Street for, all of the funds have to go to the Creative Hub. Does that preclude us, without a motion to reconsider, which as we all know is difficult to get approved, from changing that amount of funding?
Through the chair, as I read it this date, if the interpretation is had, then a motion to reconsider would be required.
Okay. That's the way I read it, and that gave me some concern. So before I go any further, Mr. Bloom, what is assuming everything's approved, what's the expected sale date for 48 Ontario?
Through the chair, obviously that's subject to a successful proposal and a successful bid that council approves. At this point, we were ideally hoping to get both the expression of interest and the request for proposals on the street probably in early January, and leaving probably a 2-month window for applications, which would leave council at a potential decision at the end of March, early April.
Okay. Is there any danger in moving the date up? Because obviously they don't have to be. I don't think they need to be in tandem, Gauquelin, Ontario. So is there any danger in moving specifically 48 Ontario Street up?
Through the chair, I mean, largely from a purely staff point of view, it's our ability to bring that forward soon, given that we're already dealing with an RFP on the street right now, and we're into Christmas season, and ultimately not wanting to rush proposals to too short of a window. We want to make sure that there's a fair window of time for any proponents to submit. Those are really the two of the major factors.
Okay, and I would agree with that, and I guess we can discuss that between now and council. But, Mr. Chair, I do have an amendment for that item number 5. I can speak to it briefly now if you want to.
Do you want to let just all the questions of staff to be asked? And
Sure. Okay.
I'll
Certainly.
come to you.
Certainly. Thank you.
Councillor Galloway Seelock.
Maybe it might be good if Councillor Davey actually puts it on the floor, so we, without any comment, just so
Yeah,
that
if you can
we
have it
do-
on the
just so that we,
projector,
if we
yeah.
have any questions, we can. Sorry, do you want to put it on? That's fine. Okay. So my questions are with respect to the report where it says. You're talking about short to medium term and medium to long term. What is your definition, or what are your kind of assumptions when you're talking short to medium and medium to long?
Through the chair, I think our expectations would be that proponents who would be bidding on the expression of interest are probably going to be looking for at least a minimum of 3 years, if not 5 years or longer. So our expectation would be that we'd be open to those proposals in terms of the short term and get the hub off the ground and running. Beyond that, it's really, I think, a question of the growth of this industry and the need or demand for this facility to grow according to the growth of the rest of the industry. So it's a little bit harder to give you an exact date, but in theory and in concept, that's would be my suggestion.
Councillor Etherington kind of touched on my one question with regards to if the building was ever to be sold, where would this use then go? Would it be the intent that it potentially would stay on those lands and just be included in an RFP?
Through the chair, ultimately I would presume there will be a lease agreement in place between the operator and the city. So if the city were to consider selling the building in advance of the expiration of that lease, then the impending purchaser would have to honor that agreement.
Okay, I'm just concerned that if we lock into something, that we need to give the expectation that it might not always be there or be in the form that it's in. And my other question is, with regards to, does this change anything with regards to the current tenants that are in the building now at 44?
Through the chair, no, we would be looking at this as essentially a lease for the ground floor space, and the other users are on the second floor.
Including, is there not someone who's leased on the ground floor right now?
Through the chair, we currently have a lease arrangement with Conestoga College that expires next year. So the expectation is that a creative hub would either commence at the ending of that lease, or if Conestoga College wanted to get out of the lease earlier, then we'd consider that.
Okay. I had another question and I just lost it. I'm at Quebecan, if I remember it. Thank you.
No problem. Councillor Gonzalo?
Earlier, someone reported that the cost of the consultant was $15,000. Were there any other costs involved in putting all this study together?
Yeah. It's okay, go ahead.
Through the chair, the $15,000 covered the cost of all of the events and assistance that we received for the consultation that took place, plus the summary report.
And the consultant and everything?
Yes.
Okay. What was done first, your report or the consultant's report?
Through the chair, the results of the various consultations was an iterative process. So as the results came in, we worked together, but the final outline from the consultant, I would say, predated the final report writing.
Because I was curious, on page 18 of the report, it refers to the report number that you've used. So it seemed like it was done first. But that's, next question, do we have any other hubs in the city?
Through the chair, kinds of hubs relating to the arts or...
hubs, just any...
the Communitech.
It's a new word, hubs. So
right. And through the chair, it's a placeholder term. The most successful model would be the Communitech hub, also located downtown.
Oh, okay, that's fine. So which we don't know. Okay, yeah. Thank you. One of the things that I was trying to figure out when I did all this reading, and I hope you can help me with this. Can you tell me what the cost is, or what the cost will be, or is estimated to establish this creative hub? And there are two parts. You know, what are the capital costs involved, and then what's an estimate of the annual operating costs? Do you have any of that information?
Through the chair, what we anticipate is that would essentially a financial plan or a business plan would be one of the criteria of any submissions for an EOI, and really it will be through that process that potential operators would suggest to us what they think those costs are, and in our case, we essentially be a landlord, so we would understand from that aspect how much we as a landlord of the space would have to invest to accommodate their tenancy.
But there will be both those costs, right?
Through the chair, at the very least, the space would have to be occupiable on sort of a bare bones shell, and then beyond that would be really up to the proposals that come in.
Yeah. Okay, so we don't know any of that yet. And my next question is: has a business case been prepared for this whole project?
Through the chair, I'd suggest that that's premature until we actually see the proposals that come in through the expression of interest, and at that time is when we would evaluate, especially if there are any financial asks of the city beyond a normal tenancy, that's the time that council would consider those.
Now, if we decide to go ahead with a creative hub, we're not going to be able to turn back. We'll be going forward.
Through the chair, through the expression of interest, essentially if you did not get a proposal that was to your liking, then you do not have to proceed with the leasing of it. Essentially, this is a first opportunity for the community to submit proposals.
My final question is, in dealing with your public engagement, I know that you talk to a lot of people that are involved, artists, people in the creative industry, the film, music, theater. Did you talk to anyone outside of that industry? Was anyone outside of that industry involved in your discussions?
Through the chair, the outreach for the consultation included stakeholders that included the Downtown Advisory Committee, local businesses, the BIA, the general public through social media, and also the heritage community. We did as much outreach as we could through our newsletters and advisory committees as well.
You talk about 300 people involved from the arts community. Do you have any idea of how many might have been involved outside of the arts community?
Through the chair, it seems that the majority of interest was certainly from the arts community. I don't know if I could say exactly the percentage of participants.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Fernandez.
Yeah, I guess my sort of ongoing concern is this: if we have a leaseor for 44 Gaukel, similar to the art gallery, the museum, we're going to have an ongoing request, I'm afraid, for grants every single year. How are we going to avoid that possibility?
Through the chair, I mean, ultimately you could, as part of the expression of interest, we're going to ask for a financial plan. We can certainly make it clear that our expectation is that we're looking for a tenant that is self-sufficient and doesn't need sort of an annual grant from the city to operate. And then ultimately you can use that in your decision process when it comes down to selecting a successful bidder.
And I think that's really critical because, I mean, this morning was so difficult and challenging, having to listen to these pleas for funding and for grants. If we have to add another one to that, who's saying, well, we need capital repairs and we need operational grants and we need this and we need that, well, I don't think we can do it. I mean, that's on the backs of taxpayers, and we have to really be very, very cautious as we move forward on this. I would like to have a better understanding from Councillor Davey about your motion that you have forward here. Because if the sale of 48 Ontario doesn't happen until near the end of 2017, are you saying that 50% of that budget should go into proceeds should go into 2018? And what was the 50%? Why 50%? Why 25 or 40 or 60 or... What was your rationale?
Sure. So I can't go too deeply into the rationale for the 50%, except to say that council is privy to a better idea of the value than we can disclose publicly. That was the overriding rationale. The other key part of the rationale is that, again, as the motion is written, it would lock us into putting the full allocation towards a creative hub. As for your question about the 2017 budget process, you're absolutely right. There's a chance that it will not be sold by then, at which case we could do one of two things. We could either refer it to a future budget process, or we could deal with it in percentage terms at the time of sale. I was very specific, though, although we all have our ideas on where extra funding should go. I very specifically did not put anything in there in terms of where the funds should go, because I think that's beyond the scope of this discussion.
Right.
Just sorry for that. I think in past practices we have, if there's a property that's set up for disposition, allocated the value for that and use that as part of our budget prior to even it's being sold. But I guess I can ask that staff that question for more clarification afterwards. Okay. But you have your minutes.
I still have 2 minutes. Yeah. Is there some way in these recommendations that we can make it very clear? Maybe I'm being a bit preemptive. Or maybe being too prescriptive, what Mr. Bloom indicated, that any leaseor of that building must be sustainable on their own, and is that a bit too premature? Just help me understand.
Through the chair, I mean, I think we've heard the feedback and take it as friendly direction that when we're developing the expression of interest, there's nothing that prevents us from asking that. That doesn't mean that council can't accept a proposal that is, not fully self-sufficient, But it's certainly, at least in terms of the criteria, that would be one that we're hoping gets met, but it doesn't mean that you can only take ones that are fully sufficient. So I think we've certainly taken that as friendly direction and would build that into the UI.
Okay. One more quick question related to the gaps. We have heard that there are gaps for particular groups, theater groups, and other gaps. My understanding is that some of these gaps are happening not because the facility isn't available, but because the time isn't available. So, let's take, for example, space that might be leased out or be rented out for a group to do a rehearsal for a community event or a performance. But all of those slots between 6 and 11 are booked solid, and they're not interested in any times during the day. And there's nothing we can do to change that, really. And even if we have an arts hub, we can't change that, right?
Through the chair, there are a couple of activities that you describe having to do with times and bookings that may or may not be alleviated depending on the proponent that submits a proposal for the hub, in this case for rehearsal time. There may be some opportunity to alleviate some of that pent-up demand. And secondly, that a lot of the activities that we're expecting to find out about in the functioning of the hub would relate to entrepreneurial support and services that currently would be recognized as a gap and an opportunity to incubate and accelerate the success of individual practitioners when they come together.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Chair Singh. So I have a question. I wonder if staff had considered adding stronger language to demonstrate our commitment to establishing a creative arts hub that would be long-term. I mean, in this recommendation, there is mention of medium to long-term on the last point, but it's just about articulating opportunities in future phases. And I'm just wondering if that had been a consideration yet.
Through the chair, we certainly see it as an opportunity. We think this industry in general is going to grow. We're seeing it in other cities already that are ahead of us. So we do see significant growth potential in this industry. How that translates to a hub, I guess, the future, can't predict the future, but I think certainly we're committed to seeing, or to at least assisting in the growth of that industry.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I would like to see us add stronger language to that end. And I have a comment, Chair.
I think it'd be appropriate to hold those comments for later.
Hold those comments.
Still questions of staff going on.
Okay. There was mention earlier by the delegation about the question around whether or not we should sell 48 Ontario. I just wanted to know if during the tours of 48 Ontario early on in the engagement process, if that was ever a topic of the conversations, or if staff could comment generally in response to that comment.
Stay rung in, Sylvia. Go ahead.
Through the chair, the tours and public consultation throughout the building wasn't specifically designed to ask people's opinion, but rather to raise awareness and gain familiarity in order to participate in the upcoming consultation. So I wouldn't say we had specific feedback on a question to people whether or not the building should be sold.
Right. And so, but you did consult with over 300 or approximately 300 individuals, and so I'm sure that can you tell us if you've had any feedback regarding that topic?
Through the chair, our focus was on the definition of the creative hub and how it would fit and what spaces would be available. So only in terms of the feedback that we got about the amount of space and the ease of access that led to the community advising more towards 44 Gaukel as an option, and by inference that the other options were on the table, thereby one of them being to sell the building and put the proceeds towards the operation of a hub at another location.
Is it the city's predilection to compete with the private sector by being a landlord to bars and office spaces, etc., or not?
Through the chair, if there could be clarification on the question.
Okay, never mind. It's more of a political question. So what I wanted to ask also then is when it comes to the costs of establishing the Arts Hub or the Creative Hub, what is your recommendation around setting aside an amount of money at this point? Or would you, can you tell us a bit about, do you have a dollar figure in mind, or do you feel that, or is there more flexibility required?
Through the chair, at this point, until we see proposals, it's really premature for us to suggest what's going to be required. It could be any number, so I would hesitate to even estimate based on not having seen any proposals come forward.
Okay, thank you. And if you're taking friendly direction from comments here, I just actually never mind. I'll comment later. So I would like to just also mention my thanks to the staff on really doing a great job on a challenging topic here. I like how you've really made a complex issue easy to understand. So thank you.
You snuck that comment in there in the end. That's okay. Councillor Gazzola.
In view of Councillor Davies' resolution here, recommendation, when is the budget meeting? 23rd of January. Is there any? Well, my other question goes to staff. Can staff give me a market value estimate for both 48 Ontario Street and 44 Gaukel Street?
No, they can't.
Why not? Market value.
If we are outlining one of the properties for disposition, I think we would be showing our cards a little bit, outlining what we presume what our property is worth. And when selling is real estate, that's the last thing you would want to do.
I did not ask what we thought our property was worth.
Clarify your question.
I said, what is the market value? Market value, our people in economic development know the real estate market.
Market values are very subjective depending on the metrics that you look at, Councillor Gazzola. It's dependent on the metrics, and I think today's not the day for us to...
This is no secret what the metrics are. The metrics are there.
The value can be subjected to different parties.
No, that's what you want to sell for or what you want to pay, but the market value is wide open there. It's not a secret
And
thing.
that's why you don't put a price as listing as we would do individually if we wanted to sell our own real estate. Here we do an RFP waiting for proposal, the right proposal based on the value related to it. So I would caution staff in answering that question. If you really would want that extra information, I don't want to limit you from getting the information that you need. I respect that you might need that to make a determination. But if you do, I would advise that you ask for this committee to go in camera, and I'm sure staff can give you the information that you're requesting.
No, I'm not going to ask for that.
Okay.
Market value, any real estate, anybody that's in the real estate business, and I assume our economic development staff can say, based on where that place is located and the size of the building.
Councilor Gazzola, you're making comments. If you want to ask staff questions.
Well, I asked the question, okay? So
And advise, if you would like to ask that question, we can go on camera.
Let staff answer it first, okay?
Yes, ring in, please. Councillor Etherington?
Councillor Gazzola is always talking about sucking and blowing. He knows what's behind his question, and I would suggest he's out of order on the question.
And fair enough, and I've already said, that's a call that I'm making. If you would like that answer, we can go into camera and staff can respond.
No, I'm not going to go to that point. We've got a resolution here that's saying 50% of something needs to be set aside.
For your benefit, Councillor Gazzola, I would like to ask staff, would it be prudent to answer that question in a public meeting? Because I don't want to make that final call. Let staff make that determination as well. Mr. Wilmer.
Through the chair, I would suggest that it would not be prudent to share that information in a public meeting.
Okay.
Okay, fine.
Councillor Gazzola.
That's fine. Thank you. I will sit with that. Thank you.
Okay. Those were all the questions of staff. If people want to ring back in for comments, I have some questions of my own. A lot of good questions have already been asked. Gives a little bit more clarity as to what we would be voting on. One thing that's still lingering in my mind, and this is an issue I've raised in the past myself, why are we doing this alone? The first question I'll ask is there an arts hub or a creative hub that could be perceived as an arts hub in the city of Cambridge or Waterloo right now?
Through the chair, there are a facility or facilities that I would suggest that do exist but are more shared workspace and don't necessarily provide the entrepreneurial support that we're suggesting as part of this. But I would defer to my colleagues who probably know the landscape.
So let me further add to that question to the same similar capacity of what is being recommended through this report. Sorry, go ahead.
Through the chair, the recommendation in the report is to seek, through an expression of interest process, an organization or operator who can meet the needs that have been identified in the community. So to that end, it would be wise for all of the proponents and people involved in these activities to collaborate as much as possible in the community. It seems to be a starting point.
No, Sylvia, my question was, is there a current creative hub or arts hub that exists in Waterloo or Cambridge, similar to or as the size of what's being recommended as a space through this report?
Through the chair, there isn't an exact hub as described in this report.
And through the process that we went into engaging our public, did we connect with our neighboring municipalities and the region as well in seeing what their appetite was in having a collaborative approach?
Through the chair, we did invite and include our partners across the region, but a specific request would be premature until the actual expression of interest had some responses.
So would it be fair that even though we might be outlining certain funds through, if supported, Councillor Davies' amendment or motion, we're not committed to that amount until the right proposal comes, and if so, is the will of the council of the City of Kitchener that they would first need to be gauge the interests of our neighboring municipalities and the region to see if there's a partnership that can be sought through that. I'm assuming that is still open, or by allocating the funding or through what's being recommended, the City of Kitchener is already committed to proceeding forward, irrespective of the capacity or the willingness of the neighboring municipalities and our upper order municipal government of the region of Waterloo.
Through the chair, all we've recommended is that the dollars be allocated. We have not suggested that that this is a decision that means that they're going to be spent on, and how much would be spent. So once we see the proposals, if that was the direction of council, was to seek other support from other municipalities or from the region, we would take that direction at that time.
Okay, good. That's comforting, and I think that would be advisable for us to do it that way. those are my questions. As I said, a lot of good questions have already been asked, so I don't want to repeat myself. I will go to the comments. Councillor Davey, go ahead.
Thank you. And I want to begin by, again, also...
Just a second. Corey, you trying to...
I did just want to provide one point of clarification as it relates to my earlier comments and to the motion. Just for council to keep in mind that just be wary of two things in terms of timing. Typically, even if we just did a direct sale, there's usually a period of due diligence, so you wouldn't actually have the funding, usually months or many months after. We also, typically it's our practice to close on a property at the building permit stage, so it would be in the many years of the future, and that's usually to protect against a proposal that you'd select that for some reason doesn't come to fruition. So I just want to make sure you're mindful of that in your discussions.
Actually, before you go there, I'll put the pause the clock. I wanted to ask staff that question regarding part of your motion where it takes it to the budget for 2017. Are we able to, and that's going to the earlier point, if you allocate a certain number, then you're disclosing to the public, but is there a way to presume that obviously it would be sold and allocate that as part of our budget for 2017? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you yet, Keaton. Go ahead, Mr. Chapman.
Through the chair, it wouldn't be the first time that council has budgeted a land sale revenue before the land sale has happened. I think the two qualifications would be you want to make sure that you weren't appropriating the funding to something that you couldn't avoid, so that if the land sale didn't materialize, you need to recognize that the funding would also disappear. And I think there's also the other practical issue that if you're disclosing 50% of a value through the budget process, you're otherwise disclosing the market value, and there's some sensitivity around that.
It could go into our tax stabilization fund. That could be recommended, right?
And I don't think the intention today was to prescribe where it would go. My only caution would be that if you spent the money before you had it, there's a real risk in doing that. If you simply identified how it would be used if and when it's received, recognizing that may not materialize and that scenario is feasible, then it could be done.
But that can be done through the budget process before the sale of that land?
It's been done before, yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Davey, I want to give you your time. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. That actually clarified a lot of what I was about to say, so that's good. I want to begin by thanking staff for stick handling what could have been a much messier process than it turned out to be. I think there's a lot of good work here. I also want to acknowledge the fact that we came at something that we knew was going to have a cost, and we actually came up with a funding source to make sure it happens. I mean, I think we've all seen lots of situations where there's something we really want to do, and we don't even bother trying to figure out how we're going to pay for it, and that's not the case here, which is why it's much easier for me to support. I'd consider deferring the entire dollar amount to a later date, but my concern was that sort of sends a mixed message to the arts community that we're really not serious about this. So that's why I think it's important that we do allocate a significant amount of funding towards this. And lastly, I just want to speak on this idea of Kitchener going it alone. I think we heard from staff that they can and will approach partners on a go-forward basis, and I think that's the way that we should do it. I think it doesn't make any sense to have a creative hub in Kitchener, a creative hub in Cambridge, a creative hub in Waterloo, and I think the next item on our agenda, the advanced manufacturing, I think that's a built-in discussion that we should be having with Cambridge and their East Side industrial lands. So if it's a situation where we can make a contribution to their manufacturing hub and make a contribution to our creative hub, it can be a much more collaborative process on a go-forward basis. But again, I'm happy to see what's before us. I have high expectations, but I guess that's going to bear out through the RFP process.
Thank you. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Singh. I will support the recommendation fully, and with the addition of Councillor Davies' slight amendment. This is something that I've wanted to see for a long time. I've been critical of the amount of time that we've spent studying, report. We're finally going to get our act together, no pun intended again, and go forward with an arts hub. As far as Kitchener going alone, I see it as, yes, we may be going alone, but my goal, and I think everyone's goal on this committee, should be Kitchener first, because we're not privy to what other conversations are at Cambridge or Waterloo, and they may not even be at the table at these types of discussions. We don't know. And I want the action here, personally. I went on a platform, make Kitchener cool, and that's not another tagline to Make It Kitchener, but that was what I want to see, and I want to see the vibrancy in our core. I'm not going to be too concerned about what's happening in Waterloo. I want it in our core. I think it'll add a great addition of quality of life. It's definitely another use for us for talent attraction. It's another way for our startup companies and other companies to want to locate downtown because they have this other options. It's all interrelated. It all intersects. It makes perfect sense, and that's why I'll be supporting this. And again, I want to compliment staff on stick handling this issue and coming up with a great solution and balancing everyone's needs. It wasn't easy, and in fact, I actually lost hope, but you guys restored my hope.
Councillor Etherington.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Well, I've moved this, so obviously I support a creative hub. However, I will not support the amendment. I don't see it as a slight amendment. I think because of its size, it will undermine what is financially required to help the hub to be successful. And I think we need to put our money where our mouths are when it comes to investing seriously in arts and culture. I've heard so many councillors over the years talk it up about arts and culture during election times, during not at election times. And I think the time is overdue where we try to change a situation where your average artist gets by on 20 grand a year. I think we should make certain that every one of these dollars from that property sale is used to its maximum to change that situation. And I would urge Council to not shortchange this plan. It's a wonderful plan to establish an arts hub. So I'll be supporting the recommendations from staff, but I will not support the amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Chair Singh. I'm fully in support of the staff recommendation, and I'm very excited about the fact that we are going to make it happen to support a creative arts hub. I too agree that, I don't have a concern about Kitchener going it alone. Artists aren't quite as aware as, councillors about their ward boundaries or about their city boundaries. They're going to go where it's happening, and let's make that Kitchener. We do have, of course, in Waterloo, the Button Factory, where lots is going on. In Cambridge, they have lots of different pockets where there's terrific arts-based work and culture-based work that's going on, and so we're not in a vacuum here in our region. I am wanting us to make sure that we are committed to the long term, to providing affordable space for arts and culture organizations and individuals to flourish. I really like the terminology used at the beginning of the presentation around supporting creative industries in terms of the career of the people involved in the industry. And the several industries. Regarding this amendment, I can't support the hard and fast number of 50% of an unknown quantity. Unfortunately, I can't support this at this time. And if this motion were to fail, I would suggest something more flexible and yet remain committed to ensuring that we have sufficient dollars to make this happen.
Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you. There's been a lot of work and a lot of conversation over the last number of years about what the needs of the arts community are. And, you know, sometimes I think we use that broad brush of arts. You know, what does art mean to any particular person? I'm sure if we took a poll in this room, it could mean any number of different things. So I know that it's been challenging, and you know, I recognize that you had 300 stakeholders who attended these meetings. Unfortunately, I did not, and that may have been an error on my part, because I think I would have been able to hear something maybe a little bit varied in their responses. But one of the things, some of the gaps that I've heard about in the past that we've had delegations up here talking about are gaps in rehearsal space, or gaps in availability time-wise related to projects that they want to move forward for themselves or their group. So I'm hoping that, you know, should we move forward with this, that it will fill that gap. I suspect that there's going to be ongoing gaps, because I just don't think we can be everything to everybody. And the greater need that we hear so often from our infrastructure people is that we are behind. We are behind on our pipes. And so part of me is saying, good for Councillor Davey to put this forward, because it may be what he's going to be going to come budget day. I don't know. I can only hope so. But we have citizens who are challenged every single month to pay for their water and their gas and their hydro. And they're going to look at this and they're going to say, because we don't have a figure here, and when that figure comes out, they're going to say, goodness gracious, I can't even afford to pay my water bill. So we have to be really careful how we move forward on this. Because yes, we have a growing and expanding arts, very big label, very big definition community. But we also have the day-to-day running of this city. And I have heard time and time again that it's parks and pipes and pavement that should be our focus. Yes, we want to have, and we've done a lot. We've done Make It Kitchener, and we've got Communitech, and we've got 44 Gaukel, and we've got Centre in the Square and Museum, and we've heard from them over and over and over again, we don't have enough money, we don't have enough money. So we have to be absolutely sure that whoever leases this space at 44 Gaukel will not require any further city funds than the capital improvements that we would do for any of our other city facilities, whether it's a community center or the auditorium or the museum, and that we have to be careful that this does not become, in the eyes of our citizens, a nice to have. I know that the arts community want to have a living wage, and yes, you deserve to have that because you're passionate about what you do. I'm passionate about what I do. We're all passionate about what we do, but that doesn't mean I'm going to expect the city or municipality or other taxpayers to fund what I'm passionate about. So I think we have to be very careful as we move forward in this, and I want to feel confident that the work that has been done will take the necessary steps to do that. With that, to that end, I would sincerely appreciate, and I know it's been a very long day already, but I would request respectfully that we break out number 4, for sure, and number 5, because that speaks to the motion separately, and vote on them as a recorded vote. The 1, 2, 3, and 6, I think, are pretty close together in terms of what their meaning is.
Well, I think I would take the amendment for Councillor Davies, so that would speak to number 5, depending on how the committee votes on that. But Mr. Wilmer, do you want to add something?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This may not be appropriate procedurally, but I wonder if I might make a suggestion. That I sense that while there may be a split on council as to how to deal with the amendment, that there may be a consensus on council if there was a slightly different approach to number 5, which is that the net proceeds from the sale of 48 Ontario North be allocated to the Economic Development Reserve, with the majority of those net proceeds being allocated to the Creative Hub. That leaves council the flexibility for anything between 51% and 99%. It's not a decision you have to make today. It's not a decision that you really can make until you know what the net proceeds are, but it makes the commitment to the arts community that it's at least half of the proceeds, and it could be as much as 99%.
I think the concern of some committee members is that they're not satisfied with at least half. They want it to be half. The concern is that they want that hard limit so that there's a clear communication to the arts community as to what's available, as opposed to indefinite dollars in the future. So
fair enough. Thank you.
Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Singh. I want to thank staff for some excellent engagement. I was at all of the engagement opportunities. It was great to see the different stakeholders sitting down at the same table and learning what the others' needs and wishes were. And I think it really helped shape the whole focus of the engagement. There was a really open-minded approach here. It wasn't us coming in with ideas. It was all greatly organic. There was a genuine desire to learn from those who attended, and the meetings were very well hosted, very well organized. The input was listened to, and as we can see in the report, it's included. I do agree with Councillor Ioannidis. I would like to see it here. I want it here so it feeds our cultural institutions, our theaters, our music venues, and I do have a heart for those not in the arts as well. And I think Councillor Davey, it's a good idea to split these proceeds and put it where some other needs are as well. So I can support that.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yes, I want to start off by saying, and you can take whatever you feel from it, but I do appreciate arts and culture. I respect innovation, technology, entrepreneurships. But those are not new things. They've been with us forever. It's just that now we have a somewhat different way of dealing with them. We're out ready to dish out funds to help everyone. I won't be supporting any of this that's before us. Here again, we have a situation where we're making a decision to move in a certain direction, but we have no idea of what costs are involved. I mean, we're talking about pledging monies from sale of assets. We could be talking about $2, $3, $4 million. Who knows? Earlier today, we had a situation where we were dealing with something that affects every property owner in this community, and we were all upset because it might cost $2 million a year. We wanted nothing to do with that. Wanted a lot more information. So, in view of all the problems that we're facing with the infrastructure, I hear that day in and day out. We went through our capital forecast last week, and we added $14 million in new things, over and above all our infrastructure problems. We're facing high bills for our consumers. This isn't the type of proposal that we should be looking at this time. We've got so many other ways that we're looking to spend our dollars. And now it seems just because we suddenly have a couple of assets that we could possibly sell, we need to sell them, get rid of them, so that gives us a bunch of money to put into an arts culture. So I won't support this at this time. Maybe a couple of years from now, when we have this creative hub and it doesn't end up costing the taxpayers any dollars, then I'll gladly resign and admit I was totally wrong. But at this point, I won't be supporting it.
Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Yeah, just briefly, I wanted to add that I've been around this horseshoe now for 10 years, and I first started sitting on the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee at that time. So I haven't the whole duration of 10 years, but it gave me a new appreciation for what all goes on in the arts and culture community. And having sat there for been there 10 years ago, I know that this idea has been on the books or on the Culture Plan 1 and Culture Plan 2 moving forward. So this is something that's been talked about for a very, very, very long time, and it's about time that we start moving forward on something. I think we have an opportunity to do that now. And we still have the opportunity through the RFP process for 44 Gaukel. If the costs don't come in the way we want it doesn't look the way we want it. So really we're saying go out, get the expression of interest, see what's out there in the community, and then we have the opportunity to move forward or not move forward at that point in time. I at first was finding it hard to try and come up to a decision on this, not knowing what we would have to invest from the city's perspective. But what I'm hearing and what I understand now is that we will still have the opportunity to say no if nothing comes back the way that we see, or at a cost that's too high. So I think that we need to move forward on this. My biggest worry and fear, because of the property that we've selected for the location, the preferred initial location, is that it gives the impression that that building is always going to be there, or that use is always going to be there. And I think, as it's been stated, we have a strategic piece of land in the downtown that could be worth a lot. And I just want to make it clear that moving forward, that this is that short to medium term solution. It doesn't mean that in the long term we can't look to integrate this on that property, but we need to make sure and give that expectation that this is not always. It has the potential to be a permanent location, but it may not be. And so I think we need to make sure, because once we put something in place, it's hard to remove it. So I think if we give those expectations up front, that people know there may be some disruption down the road, it'll be easier to accept at the time.
Councillor Janetzky.
Thank you. I've been listening to all the comments from all parties here on both sides, both for and against, and I've been mulling it over in terms of where we go on this. And I mean, arts do have their role here in the community, and whether you look at the top groups, whether they're the symphony and the Center Square groups, down to the local grassroots people trying to establish themselves, yes, they have a role to play. I see this as really a nice to have facility. And make a hub and make something of it. Yet it's when I think about, let's go. It's good. It's got its benefits. It's to the benefit of the community. And yet I look at the strategic action plan that we looked at earlier today, and there's almost 100 items on there or whatever, and some of them are just straightforward. Others are cost items, and geez, each one is nice to have and nice to go forward with. And how can we afford everything? It's pretty difficult to do that. And of course, there's the old argument we hear from staff about the infrastructure. Utility rates and user fees are up at 7, 8, 9, 10%. And the public has an outcry. And yet they have to pay for that, and yet we go ahead and do something with arts. Yeah, I'm in the field as well, but somehow there's only so much money in the pocket, and I don't feel the hub. I feel some uncertainty in it in terms of where we're going, and I don't think it's the right thing to do at this point in time. So I won't be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Janetzky. And those are all the comments. I'll quickly make mine. The way I see it is, first, I want to give compliments to staff. I think I was a strong opposing voice as to the direction that we were heading, and my fear was that we were predetermining the result. And that's not necessarily what happened. I have to compliment staff on their perspective was wide enough in capturing the feedback from various different community groups and advisory committees to find a location and settle on something that I think could make this possible and viable. Early on, my fear was that we were narrowing too much, and that was going to be in its own failing, but that didn't happen. So before us, we have a recommendation to proceed on a location of a building that we own, where we can, we are in a position to have a determination of how that space can be utilized, and any enhancement to that building will be our own, to our own benefit, irrespective of what the success or failure of any future arts hub may be. So just want to make sure that compliments of staff are acknowledged and sent from my behalf. Apart from that, I do want to give my voice of caution still. I like to bring back the word, Creative Initiative Enterprise, CEI. We had a lot of faith as to what that organization could deliver, and some of the mandate of CEI was very similar to what we are envisioning what an arts hub is. I know it's a larger envelope and scope, but still it's some of the similar aspects of helping and supporting and incubating our arts community. So really what lies, I think, in any success will not be just the idea of an arts hub. I think that in itself is too simplistic. It's really the organization, the people that are involved, and execution. So we have to get that right. And the other is, of course, the aspect of funding. We have to proceed this being very clear to whoever the proponents are who come forward and their willingness to take this challenge on, that there is a certain limitation as to what this community can afford. It's not a limitless pot. I think we already do well above and beyond compared to our neighbors in supporting our arts and culture community simply through the Center of the Square, to the Symphony, to the KW Art Gallery, just to name a few, and of course the museum as well. And this would be one more organization where City of Kitchener would have a large stake in it. And that's why I think as we envision what that's going to be, we need to articulate and try to encourage a aspect of collaboration with our neighboring municipalities and the region. I think there needs to be a larger buy-in. It can't be just us. When we try to control it in our effort, it's got to be here. I would love for it to be here in Kitchener. I referenced the KW Art Gallery. It's here in Kitchener. But again, it's funded through by some other municipalities, same as the Symphony and the museum as well. So it can be here because we are leading it, but there can be other partners, and we have to encourage that collaboration. With that, it has been moved by, well, actually, I'll take the motion that Councillor Davey has first. Recorded vote, or?
I've asked for recorded votes.
Please vote for the amendment that Councillor Davey has put forward. The amendment for Councillor Davey. All those in favor? Opposed? And the motion carries. And now and Councillor Fernandez, you said you wanted to take out number 4 separately? Well, 5 has already been voted, so.
It was 5. No, that's fine. We can leave it.
Leave the way it is? Okay. So this has been amended as approved through Councillor Davies' motion. So as written in the recommendation, all in support? Or is it recorded vote? Okay, recorded vote on both. We're now voting on the original motion, as amended by Councillor Davies, as I said. All in favor? And opposed? And that also carries. Thank you to staff and all those involved through the engagement process as well. We have item number 2. There is a recommendation, or as advised through staff. Oh, Councillor Ioannidis?
Yeah, I'll put forward that we defer item number 2 till, what's the time? Sorry. The 12th? I'm not sure I have. It's the 12th.
To the 12th? And that's the standing committee?
Yes.
Okay. All right. The recommendation is before us. All those... Is it special council or standing committee? When's the next standing committee?
January 12th. That's
Go ahead.
one where it's
Through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Bernard, who authored the report, wouldn't be available on the next standing committee day. So our recommendation is to take it straight to special council on the 12th.
He will be available on the 12th?
Of December. And
Of
yes,
December?
He would, and
Okay.
yes, he would be available at that time.
Okay.
So it's December 12th.
Sure. All those in favor? Opposed? And that also carries. For item number 3, we're going to defer that into the next phase. We are at 7 o'clock. There is supper, I'm guessing. Okay. Do we have to do special council before 7, or does it matter? Yeah, it can be done afterwards. Doesn't necessarily need to be done before the committee. Okay, if that's the case, the committee is going to recess. Let's have our supper and convene back in. If anyone is here for the later items, I know the public meeting notice was for 7 o'clock, but the entire day has been running long, so our apologies. So please allow us just to have a very quick supper, and we'll reconvene again as quickly as possible. Thank you. Let's give ourselves at least 20 minutes or half an hour. What's the will of the committee? 7:30? I don't think we probably will. So let's aim for 20 minutes then. All right, 7:20. Yes. It's a negotiation back and forth. Sorry, some of you were here before when I made the comments. This today committee just ran really long. In fact, we still have some other items that got deferred for later on in the evening. So we're just quickly grabbed a bite to eat. Members of the committee are still kind of finishing off. We'll get started in the next couple of minutes. All right, let's convene in this meeting. Welcome everyone to the Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee, the second half of it anyways. I have to read this out. This is a formal public meeting to consider applications under the Planning Act. If a person or public body does not make oral or written submissions to the City of Kitchener before the proposed applications are considered, the person or public body may not be entitled to appeal the decision to the Ontario Municipal Board and may not be added as a party to a hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Municipal Board. I'm going to just reshuffle the order a little bit. Mr. Mancini's been here since almost 5 o'clock. I'm going to bring that one to first. So item number 7. I'm going to start there. 7. Item number 7, yes. Zoning application, temporary use bylaw for 87 Victoria Street North, the KW Working Center for the Unemployed. Item number 6, it's on my sheet here, says okay, yes, it's 6 on the on our agenda. Just in my note here, it says 7, so my apologies. So number 6. Mr. Dernhardt, do you want to make your presentation first? So item number 6, as is outlined. When you're ready.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Before you is a zone change application received by the Planning Division to permit a temporary use bylaw. The subject property is misleadingly addressed as 87 Victoria Street North, located near the intersection of Victoria Street North and Weaver Street West. The property is occupied by an existing residential care facility owned and operated by the KW Working Center for the Unemployed. The applicant is proposing a temporary use bylaw to allow habitation of 2 7.5 square meters, which is 80 square feet, structures for a maximum period of 3 years, which are accessory to the existing residential care facility located on the subject property, whereas the zoning bylaw does not permit habitation of accessory structures. The structures are to be used to house homeless people who are unable to stay in traditional shelters. It should be noted that the funding has been provided by the Region of Waterloo to assist with developing the accessory units as a pilot project. 3 years is the maximum duration of temporary use bylaws passed under Section 39 of the Planning Act. Council may grant further extension by bylaw upon expiry of the temporary use provision. Fire staff and building staff were directly involved in the review of the application. Fire staff inspected the units and met with the applicant and are satisfied that all fire safety requirements have been met. The accessory structures will be monitored 24 hours a day by the existing residential care facility staff. Planning staff is of the opinion that the proposed temporary use to allow habitation of 2 accessory structures for a maximum of 3 years is a sound approach for addressing the needs of the homeless on the subject property. It is planning staff's opinion that allowing habitation in the accessory structures will provide safe accommodation to Kitchener residents who are unable to sleep in traditional temporary shelters. It should also be noted that the City currently does not have a framework to consider this type of use. The temporary use bylaw allows an opportunity to test the use in a defined location for a limited time to determine if habitation of the accessory units in some circumstances is appropriate. In conclusion, planning staff is of the opinion that the proposed zone change demonstrates good planning principles and offers a temporary time frame to test the appropriateness of such units. Staff therefore recommends approval of this application. If there are any questions, myself and the applicant, Joe Mancini, would be happy to answer any questions for you.
There are questions. We'll just hear, let's ask questions of you first because enough people have already rung in. Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. I'm just really excited to see this coming forward. I want to see us learn about how the people who use these bunkies find them, if they what they like about them, and if there's potential for a need for more after a few years of this pilot project. And at the appropriate time, I'd like to move this recommendation. I also want to just make a tiny little remark that in the report on page 6.1, it says that this location is in Ward 1, but it's in fact in Ward 10.
Yes. Councillor Fernandez?
I have no questions either, but I just want to applaud Joe Mancini and his group for thinking about, no pun intended, outside of the box way of housing people who are disenfranchised and who are living on the streets and giving them, and I hate that I can't see your face, but there you are. You continue to amaze me and surprise me at the way you and Stephanie and your group think about ways to help the people in our community in such amazing and wonderful and compassionate ways. And that I don't think there's any question that this is something that we should heartily approve.
Thank you. If you can focus on the questions of staff. Joe has mentioned he wanted to speak. We'll give him opportunity if he still wants to, and then we can make comments at that point or directly speak to him. Councillor Etherington.
Through you, Mr. Chair, question to staff. Would these shipping containers be allowed elsewhere in the city, other neighborhoods?
Through the chair. At this time, the pilot project is restricted to the subject property, and it will be on a temporary use, as noted in the staff report, to test the appropriateness of them.
No, I recognize that, but once they're approved, would you allow them in other neighborhoods?
They would be subject to the same review as this application was.
Okay. I found in relation to the fire code, in the actual report, this was approved by the fire department? Because I read otherwise in the report.
The appendix is the staff comment provided by fire. The applicant and myself worked with fire to address all the issues, and before we proceeded with the application, we met with fire and they provided a clearance letter for us.
Okay. I think my other questions I'll ask directly to Joe when he gives his information. Thank you.
Councillor Janetsky.
Yeah, question to staff. Are residential uses permitted in the warehouse district in general?
Through the chair, and generally, no, they are not. However, through a housekeeping bylaw, a residential care facility was added to permit the existing residential care facility.
If you can speak a little louder, please.
Sorry about that.
We get cut off here.
Through a previous zone change application, a residential care facility was added to a permitted use on the property. So essentially, these bunkies are accessory to the existing residential care facility.
So this is a residential care use permitted currently under D6 zoning?
Yes, it is.
In a warehouse district? Okay. There are regs on that, I would assume, on that property. How many parking spaces are being displaced?
There will be no parking space displaced.
So where are you putting it?
The bunkies are currently located there. They're permitted as accessory structures. The application is to strictly disallow habitation of the accessory structures because in the bylaw, habitation is not permitted in these type of structures.
Sorry, say the last part again?
Habitation in accessory structures is not permitted. So they went through the site plan process to update the site and locate the accessory structures on the subject property.
So go back to the site plan that you had there, the air photo. So whereabouts is it on that property? And that's 8791, right?
If you look up just above the 91, you'll see two smaller square structures.
Go back to the previous photo.
So they're adjacent to the existing residential care facility, located between the residential care facility and the working center's adjacent property, which is the soup kitchen.
So they're there right now, the way they're showing it.
Yes.
And are they occupied right now?
No, they are not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, those were all the questions of staff. Joel, would you still like to speak to the committee? Yeah. You have 5 minutes.
Yeah, I don't need to say very much. I think that it's kind of straightforward, that it's a pilot project. We do run the hospitality house, which is a place for 6 people. There's 24-hour care at the site. Of course, we operate with Second Look, the store right beside the Bunkies, as well as St. John's Kitchen up above. So there's actually and also the dental clinic is also in that property area. So there's a lot of support. Our outreach workers will be part of ensuring these bunkies are looked after. We've upped lighting. We probably will also have cameras in the area, and we think that the individuals who use these units, they're probably people already sleeping around downtown Kitchener who don't have places to go because they're not really fit for shelter, but they actually do look after themselves. And we hope that by finding the right individuals, working with them through our outreach, that this will be a decent opportunity for them.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And thank you to city staff.
No, sorry.
pulling this through.
There's members of the committee that just rung in. Councillor Fernandez.
Thanks, Joe. And do you see this, this is a pilot project located in an area where there can be lots of support for these citizens. Do you see this as something that could be located in other parts, certainly in the core, because that would keep, it's often the preferred location for some of these citizens, but it would also keep them safe during very cold weather and keep them close to amenities?
We certainly think there's possibilities for a number, or for ideas like this. We know it's very challenging within the bylaws as they exist. We are talking to the provincial people. This bylaw will certainly give us opportunities, or give the provincial people opportunities to look at what the potential is. I mean, they've, in their own writings, policies, they are looking at these kind of small house options and finding ways where you don't have to shelter people, people can look after themselves. But you do need, there has to be a little bit of coordination to make it work.
Right.
So it depends where these things can go.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Januski.
Thank you for coming in, Mr. Mancini. Just looking at the photo there, I somehow envisioned that this would be sort of a container similar to shipping containers that they have on liners crossing the Pacific, etc., which are much longer. But these are just, 8 by 10 in size?
They are.
They're really smaller than a garden shed.
Yes.
I mean, I have a garden shed that's 100 square feet, and there ain't much room in there. So
it's pretty surprising how big they are, but that's these are in terms of working with the building code as it stands. We had to create something that was under 100 square feet or 107 square feet. So that's what we ended up with. We could have gone a different route, which say would be a 200 square foot unit, but that would have entailed a different kind of planning process. We chose to go this route.
So where'd you find a container so small?
Well, we had them made up. They were made at double our steel.
Oh, they're made up. Okay,
Yeah.
I thought
Actually, it's a 20-footer cut in half.
A 20-footer cut in half.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's what I thought. I thought it was something bigger, and then you cut it, and then you blended it in somehow, and I was wondering how that all takes place. And since it's less than 80 square feet, you don't need a building permit.
That's right.
Yeah. So
that's why they're there. However, we can't they can't be habitable.
That's true.
Until we could pass this temporary bylaw. And that was kind of the planning department's thinking, that we could move forward. Building department was all right with us putting them there. We just couldn't have anyone living in them.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Councillor Etherington.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Joe, welcome. Sorry we kept you so long. Just a couple of quick questions. As far as washrooms are concerned, overnight, where would the occupants of the shipping containers, where would they find
Yeah,
washrooms?
for sure. That's the disappointing part of this process is that there was, we thought common sense would mean that we could have composting toilets in those units. But as the Ontario Building Code is structured, that's not an option when there are nearby sanitary lines, which doesn't really make sense, but there's reasons for that. Again, that's something that I think we can pursue at the provincial level. In the meantime, I guess there's two ways of responding to that. One is that individuals spend their nights outside all through the year, and they have to look after their business somehow, and they do. We do provide a fair bit of opportunities within this place, Hospitality House, St. John's Kitchen, of course. And of course, the most important public washroom is City Hall in the downtown at night. And so that's also an option. But there isn't a great answer. We would love to put composting toilets and allocated money to do that, but we weren't able to, legally at least.
And my second question, again, relates to the fire code I was talking about. Presumably, I don't want to prejudge this, but you'd have smokers. They smoke, and they're in the containers, so I'm a little worried about that.
I don't know, do smoke alarms go off in containers? They might. People can smoke in their houses, so
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
There's ventilation in the unit, so I don't think that, I think that people would smoke if they choose.
And my last question relates to, and I'm all in favor of housing homeless people in any fashion, but I presume these are people who, and I know there are a small group of people who will not, no matter what we do, stay in shelters. Are these the people we're talking about?
There is that group, and there's a lot of reasons why someone doesn't stay in a shelter. There's anxiety. Some of the individuals, it's high anxiety around being so close to other people. There's other reasons for individuals, especially complete independence or a sense of independence. These units, there's not going to be a cost to live in them at this point. So it would be someone who doesn't have a lot of money. It's kind of, we really actually want to, that's part of the pilot. I mean, we can identify individuals very easily. We're going to see how that will live itself out.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, those are all the questions. Thank you. Yeah. Can I have a mover? Oh, you did? Okay. All right. Good. So the item has been moved by Councillor Marsh. All those in favor? Opposed? And let me get that again. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Councillor. The efficiency of time. There's plenty of more opportunity to give comments on other agendas as well. So item number 4, draft plan subdivision for zone change application, New Dundee Road, Stafford Woods, Activa Holding, Inc. Ms. Westerholt, do you want to make your presentation first? Whenever you're ready.
Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. We'll have two reports this evening that are very similar. And I will briefly discuss the very first application, which is for the Mattamy Monarch site, which is located, geographically speaking, in Dune South, in the Dune South planning community, centrally between Grow Drive to the west and Robert Ferry Drive to the east, and it is located north of Dodge Drive. Mattamy Homes has purchased the draft-approved property and wishes to provide the consumer with a number of variety of housing options with specific design features and lot configurations that are unique to their housing style and their products. As a result, a number of technical types of changes to the existing zoning regulations are being sought. The effect would be that they would slightly reduce the setbacks to the side and rear yards, a slight increase in height of the buildings with a minor reduction in lot widths. It's important to note, though, that the base zoning of this subdivision is not being changed, and the proposed amendments are simply to the regulations of the zone. They would be similar to minor variances that one would have on a site-specific basis, but they are being dealt with comprehensively across the entire subdivision. These new regulations will result in improved design flexibility and land efficiencies, will help achieve better urban design through enhanced architectural articulation, compact urban form, porches and verandas, and interesting roof lines, which together will create a more attractive and lively and inviting streetscape. The proposed changes will recognize and facilitate the provision of different housing styles and options that are detailed in the next few slides that I will show you. Simply stated, the proposed changes are refinements to the existing regulations that would facilitate the provision of different housing styles and options, which, when implemented, will enhance the neighborhood by providing that front porch style living. The resulting number of lots in this plan have slightly increased from 205 residential units on the previously approved plan to 217 units. This first slide is an example of the Mattamy subdivision in our Rosenberg community, showing the types of wraparound porches, building articulation, and architectural features such as gables and unique windows and porches, as well as the enhanced streetscape.
Sorry, carry on.
The second photo that I've pulled up here demonstrates the slight increase in height. If you look at the house that's in the center there, that indicates that there's a slight increase. I don't even think that meets the maximum that is currently permitted under the zone, but that just shows you what one can do by just having a little bit increase in height. It can provide some interest in the roof lines, and it breaks up the homogeneity of the streetscape and provides some architectural interest and style. This next slide shows the front porches, which allows for that front porch style living, as witnessed in some of our older established neighborhoods in the city. In fact, I think the styling of these houses could really reflect some of the houses that are in our older neighborhoods. On-street parking is unaffected, and the streetscape appears to be quite charming. This last slide shows a variety in housing styles that can be achieved with the new refined regulations proposed. And it shows a slightly higher roof line again on the house in the middle, which breaks up the skyline and adds interest to the streetscape. In conclusion, planning staff is recommending approval of the zone change for the following reasons. The application conformed to the policies of the city's official plan, the regional official plan, and the provincial policy statements. Extensive technical review of the proposed changes has occurred. It facilitates a housing variety and options, and it encourages a high quality of urban design and enhances our streetscapes. It supports the city's urban design initiatives through front porch living. The requested changes continue to provide for safe sight lines for pedestrians and vehicles alike. On-street parking is not impacted. The width of the boulevard right-of-ways also is unaffected by these changes. A slight increase in the total number of units from 205 to 217 is being proposed. A park block is being relocated and open space has been added. And last but not least, staff is of the opinion that this is good planning. Thank you. That concludes my presentation. I'm open for any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Councillor Janetsky.
This application on the zoning bylaw has a number of special regs that apply to it, a variety of, as outlined in the staff report. And I'm just wondering that this application is sort of similar to other applications that council has done over the past several months and maybe the last few years. Yet I note that, shortly, some months later, I look in the committee of adjustment applications, and the developer or the builder goes in, he's got a whole bunch of committee of adjustment requests for special regs to be further reduced from whatever was approved by council. And here we have regs that are being proposed. Do I see sometime down in 2017 or whenever that some builders will come back along the way and say, well, geez, these regulations aren't quite what we want. We've got to go to committee of adjustment and do 30 lots. I mean, I see it happening, and you guys process the applications, you approve, you make recommendations. Is this sort of addressing that, or are we expecting more C of A stuff in the future?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would like to just add, by doing it in a comprehensive manner, I'm anticipating that there won't be as many minor variances in the future. I have no guarantee that there would be no minor variances, so I think I can't say that with certainty. However, by looking at it comprehensively throughout the subdivision, I think we will have addressed many of the concerns that are raised by builders when you go from plan to plan that have, some restrictions in terms of the zoning. I think this will incorporate many of the designs and will allow for that flexibility that typically is being sought at a minor variance stage.
You said that in your first sentence, and in terms of your reply, you don't anticipate that to be means that, well, yeah, there's potential of C of A files. Yet you said you did a comprehensive review with the developers to address this. So would that not say, okay, here it is, we've agreed that we're going to reduce side yards or rear yards or whatever, and this is our final position, and yet 6 months later to come back and want more? I mean, I thought you have to take a stand. I mean, you do a zoning bylaw, you do 85-1, you establish regulations, now you're putting special regulations, which is fine, and I can understand that, and then you see a V and we ask for more. I don't understand.
That's the process. But
through you, Mr. Chair, I would like to just add that this is one builder and one builder who has a very specific product, and these zoning regulations have been tailored to that builder's needs and product. Oftentimes, what we have in certain other subdivisions, we have multiple builders who then have different products and perhaps have different needs. While I don't disagree that perhaps there is a potential, I think the risk of that is fairly low, simply because we've been working very closely with this particular builder in terms of establishing the required setbacks and height regulations that will accommodate their building product.
Mr. Bernard, do you want to add?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Just very, very quickly, and when I did buzz in, and since then, Ms. Von Westerveld did actually, Westerholt did actually answer some of my, or cover off some of my comments. But essentially, no matter how comprehensive our review, and in this case it is very comprehensive, and we applaud the builder for dealing with this on a comprehensive basis. It's better for the community that there's one decision-making process instead of dribs and drabs over the course of several years. We are in no position to deny a future application, and landowners can always apply to make changes. We will look at those at that time, and before recommending an approval, we'll assure ourselves that that is the right way to go.
Okay, and I can appreciate that answer, because I know when you get, I mean, is Mattamy and Monarch the two main builders in this subdivision? and they usually build their own homes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, actually, Mattamy has purchased the former Monarch plan, and so Mattamy would be the only builder.
So the self-builders, they don't go ahead and sell off 20, 30 lots to other builders just to...
Not typically, I don't think so.
That was not my understanding either. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Yes. Thank you, Councillor Singh. Julianne, I don't know, one of the slides there, a few back with the house, yeah, right there. What's the distance between the two houses there?
This is an example in Rosenberg where the setbacks are narrower than what would be permitted in Dune South. I unfortunately am not aware of exactly the distance, but it is narrower than what is being proposed for Dune South.
Oh, this is narrow.
This is narrower, yes.
Okay.
In Dune South, they are what is recommended in your draft bylaw that is attached. Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to get a verification because I agree with the recommendation. I think it's we need to look at better uses and yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Fernandez.
I'm just a little bit confused because this is item number 5, correct? You're not talking about both items, are you, Ms. Van Westerholt? Like number 4, the Activa Holdings, and number 5?
I'm only speaking about the Mattamy subdivision, but you will find that there are a number of similarities between the two applications.
Right, and I understand that there is a delegation for number 5 and 4.
I realize that.
Okay, so I'm going to reserve my questions until the delegation speaks.
Yeah. Thank you. So, Councillor Fernandez is picking up on a good point. I didn't say anything because everyone had rung in. We're pretty comfortable with the process. We know, especially in the planning matters, staff typically presents first, but there usually is on a proponent or on behalf of the proponent a representative that comes and makes a delegation. So we have a couple other items as well. So similar to the usual practice, after staff have given their presentation, please hold off on your questions of them, so don't ring in. Allow the delegate, ask the question of the delegate, then we can ask further questions of staff. It allows for a better process. So we have, sorry, can I have Ms. Barsdale for GSP Group, please? You have 5 minutes to make your delegation.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of committee. My name is Kristen Barrisdale from GSP Group. We are the agents acting on behalf of Mattamy Homes. We're just here to say that we've had a chance to review the staff report, as well as through numerous discussions and collaboration with the city planning staff. We are in support of staff's recommendation. There are representatives here from Mattamy Homes tonight, Mr. Brad Tressler and Mr. Tim Schnarr, if you have any questions specific of Mattamy Homes, and I'm happy to answer any questions with regards to the proposed zone change in front of you.
There is one, Councillor Jetsky.
Yeah, thank you for coming in, and I mean, great presentation, nice, sweet, and short, just to answer questions, which is the way I like it. Anyways, I asked a similar question to staff about the special regulations that is part of the zoning bylaw that are being established here. Are you satisfied with those regulations?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, the regulations that you see in front of you, I would suggest that they are a refinement of some of the practices that Mattamy has used in the Rosenberg subdivision. They've been further refined through best practices as well as discussions with city staff about what was working and what wasn't working out there. And it reflects the products that Mattamy intends to build in the subdivision.
Well, I appreciate the answer, and it sounds like an excellent answer in terms of addressing what suits their needs, etc., and is reflected in the zoning regulations. So does that mean that you will not be applying for any committee of adjustment applications in the future for further reg reductions or changes?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can't speak to future applications with regards to minor variances, but I can reiterate the fact that what you see in front of you is based on the refinement and best practices of what they've done in Rosenberg South and what they feel would be a best situation for this subdivision.
Okay, and I appreciate the answer, because seeing the system the way it works, you can ask for something here, get approval, and come back to another committee that doesn't even come back to council. It's a separate committee of adjustment of individuals, and they'll give you another more regulation reduction. So, you know, all of a sudden you get real condensed housing scheme along the street. I mean, it's more dense than sardines in a can, you know. Thank you.
Councillor Fernandez.
Yes. So, in reviewing the comments from our transportation staff, there were a number of concerns that they listed, and especially with regards to the driveway setback. Have you addressed all of those concerns that were listed by Mr. Ken Meyer?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there was a few meetings and correspondence back and forth with the Traffic and Transportation Group at the City. They did express some concerns with regards to particularly visibility triangles in the driveways as you're backing out. And the regulations that you see in front of you are actually a slight differentiation from what was originally requested. They've been modified to take into consideration the concerns and address the concerns of the Traffic Division.
Okay, so in this picture, I'm seeing some of the products that Mattamy has put forward in Rosendale community. I'm looking at the little tiny green space, which is supposed to be, I guess, normally would be space for on-street parking. How are we going to deal with? How are you going to deal with that? I noticed that the apron looks a little wider at the bottom. Is your hope that additional parking would be allowed on the apron?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the intent is for driveways to be twinned, similar to what you see in the picture up there. As part of the conditions of draft approval with the associated draft plan of subdivision, we are also required to prepare an on-street parking plan to the satisfaction of city staff at the time of registration. If you refer to the zoning sketch that was provided to you, there is also a significant amount of frontage along the street that's associated with swim block and park that also provides some opportunity for parking. So it's our feeling that through all these different considerations that we can prove at the time of registration that sufficient on-street parking can be provided.
Would staff like to clarify something? Or?
I just wanted to add that, yes, the application has already gone through draft plan approval, and one of the requirements was, as Ms. Barrisdale pointed out, an on-street parking plan, which has been, which will be to the satisfaction of the city. In addition, the pairing of driveways is a practice that is used in order to allow for additional space along the street to provide for on-street parking. I just wanted to point out, too, that although these houses appear closer, in the Dune South community there are different practices and different regulations, and this is a community that is more dense than what the Dune South community would be. So that will also assist with the on-street parking situation.
Okay, thank you. I do have a couple of questions of our infrastructure and community services staff.
Yeah, no problem. I think everyone is following the report correctly. Just on the onset, I had said for New Dundee Road and Activa Holding instead. Obviously, as was presented, it's for Blair Creek. Mattamy, it's just our agenda is a little mixed up compared to what I'm seeing on here, so that's why. But anyways, there's some questions of staff? Councillor Ioannidis?
Yes, thank you. To the plan that was devised by your client in Rosenberg, how did that work out for you guys in the sense, how many units did you end up putting in that area? Like, did you build?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I may ask representatives from Mattamy to answer that question, they're a bit more familiar with it.
Good evening, Chair and members of Planning Committee. My name is Brad Trusser. I'm with Mattamy Homes. Just so I understand your question, you're wondering how many units we built in Rosenberg?
Yeah, like how many units have you built so far? You're not completed yet, correct?
We're not completed. The entire Mattamy community in Rosenberg is about 1,100 units, of which 600 are occupied today.
Okay, so relatively, there is a demand for this product.
Tremendous demand. Like the zoning bylaw that we're proposing here today is really driven by our customers and the preferences of our customers and what they want in a home.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Fernandez?
Questions or staff?
Of staff, yeah, okay. Councillor Etherington, is it of the delegation or staff? Then now's your opportunity.
Thank you. Intensification of older neighborhoods. I noticed that planners were discouraging double garages out front. This seems directly opposite to that planning concept. Is that because we're looking at much denser houses on your property?
Through you, Mr. Chair, and I may ask Julianne to comment on this, but if I recall, the original directions and concerns with regards to double car garages had to do with particularly small lots that were roughly about 30 feet in frontage. There was not enough space to get a double car garage, a driveway, a front porch, and a yard. The lots that you're seeing here are larger lots. Those are likely a 36-foot lot, so that's 6 extra feet provides sufficient space for a front yard as well as a double car garage.
And as far as the way they look, that doesn't matter?
Sorry, pardon me?
What does that mean?
Maybe that's subjective,
yes.
But those don't look very attractive to me with the garages out front. Do you have any comment on that?
Well,
Through you,
so how
Mr.
can she comment on your opinion as to how they look, Councillor Etherington?
Well, maybe she has her own opinion.
You're welcome to provide your own opinion as to how they look.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can appreciate your concern with regard to design. I do think it's subjective. As Mr. Tressler said, that they're trying to create a product out here that meets the demands of the customer. So double car garage ensures that there is sufficient parking for 2 vehicles. And I think that the graphics that you see in front of you have also provide for a significantly sized porch that allows for people to congregate and socialize and have a community with their neighbors.
On the second floor?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's a porch on the second floor, but there's also a porch to the way you would see it, the left side of the driveway.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Galway-Sealock?
I wasn't going to ask a question, but I feel the need to at this point because of some of the comments and questions that just were asked. This question is probably going to be for Mr. Tressler with regards to how you engage your customers with regards to the design of the products that you end up building.
Through you, Chair, I think the question was, how do we design a product to meet the demands of the customer?
Right. And do you engage the customer or the potential customers in that decision making?
No, great question. When we entered this market 6 years ago, we conducted various focus groups and gauged the preferences of customers, design preferences, house sizes, features, and we continue to follow up with our current customers today. So what we're asking for is exactly what we're feeling the market and our customers want.
Right. And can you just remind me of how many homes you built in the Rosenberg community last year?
So through you, Chair, last year we closed about 300 homes and sold about the same number of homes in the Rosenberg community, our Wildflowers community.
So there's obviously a significant demand within a 1-year time frame for this product.
Through you, Chair, we've been seeing a significant demand, and inventory is not keeping up to that demand right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And those are all the questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
So of staff, Councillor Fernandez.
Yes, this is actually a question for Cynthia and Justin. Just exactly what you didn't think I was going to do. Sorry. I'm looking at this picture and some of the other pictures that we were shown. From an operation point of view, from parking point of view, which are under your jurisdiction, snow removal, do you see some challenges with development and housing like this? And possibly Mr. Make might want to chime in too, because I can see some issues around bylaw.
Cynthia?
So, through the chair, I can't comment specifically on the area, I have not been out, but I do know that our operations staff are at the table, often talking about, issues that they're having when planning staff are looking at designs of communities. So.
Yeah, so I mean, it's one of our staff, Mr. Meyer, who commented that he was concerned about the parking issues and the setbacks. But as far as what you understand and what I'm understanding from Ms. Van Westerholt, all of those concerns have been put to rest?
Mr. Pennard might be.
Yeah, I was just a point of information. So the correspondence from Mr. Meyer predates the final iteration of this plan, and the concerns expressed in that correspondence has since been addressed. And Mr. Chair, if you'll just indulge me, because I mispronounced her name, I'm going to give it another crack, but it was Julianne Von Westerholt. And this is actually the second time that I've done this around the horseshoe, so thank you for indulging me.
That's all right.
And I apologize, Julianne.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification from both of you. I noticed that it was September 29th, and that's why I'm raising it. I wondered how far along we had gotten with regards to these concerns. Okay, that's all for now. Thank you on this one. I have some questions for the next one.
Okay. So those are all the questions of staff. Can I get a mover for the item? Moved by Councillor Davey. Any comments? Councillor Fernandez?
I'm going to make a comment about this site, but because it does deal with both this item number 5 and item number 4, I have asked staff some questions. I'm just going to bring it up, related to, because both of these sites were part of the OMB appeal process and were decisions that were made at the OMB. I want to make sure that when we're looking at the infiltration, the water quality and quantity, and the monitoring that's going to happen, can you please give me a response regarding some of the questions I sent you last week? How will the monitoring be done as per the conditions imposed by the OMB decision? Who will pay for this monitoring now and in the future, 5, 10 years out, and who will do the monitoring as the future years move forward?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm able to answer those questions for Councillor Fernandez. Firstly, the monitoring that Councillor Fernandez is referring to is the monitoring that has occurred as part of the draft approval conditions, which were recommendations made in the Upper Blair Creek Functional Drainage Study that was approved in 2009. Who is going to be doing the monitoring? The monitoring, there are 2 levels. The site-specific monitoring is done by the developer as consultants, and the system-wide monitoring is done by the GRCA on behalf of the City of Kitchener. Who's paying for the monitoring? The system-wide monitoring is being paid through development charges in perpetuity. And the individual site monitoring is being paid by the developers for their individual sites.
Okay, and that's now and in perpetuity?
The site monitoring is part of their draft approval conditions. There's a time frame on that, but the overall system, so the entire Blair Creek watershed system, will be monitored in perpetuity through development charges.
Okay, I just want to make sure that that's on the record, so that in the future we're not hearing that there's additional costs related to the monitoring. And I know that the stormwater utility fee is still going to be applied to all of these properties, but I do have ongoing concerns because of the Upper Blair Creek watershed study and all of the conditions that were imposed by the OMB, that we have to make sure that those conditions are followed to the strictest letter, because if in 5 to 7 or 8 years we see a significant change to that watershed, we have to be able to go back to the development industry who assured everybody at the OMB that they had the right numbers and the right technology to not have have that area impacted. So thank you very much for having those answers for tonight.
You're welcome.
Those are all the comments. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And that item carries. And next up, Mr. Bateman will make the presentation for the zone change application on New Dundee Road, Stafford Woods, Activa Holding, Inc. When you're ready. Again, after the staff presentation, please hold your questions to staff. There is a delegation. Ask the questions of the delegation, and then we will go back to staff. Mr. Bateman, whenever you're ready.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of committee, staff, and fellow residents. I'm here tonight to speak to the recommendation before committee for a zoning bylaw amendment proposing new regulations for the Stafford Woods draft plan of subdivision located in Dune South. Just to give you a little bit of context, the Stafford Woods plan of subdivision is located in the Dune South community, and it's bounded by Dodge Drive to the east, New Dundee Road to the south, Rydell Drive to the west, and Stafford Drive to the north. The plan consists of approximately 1,500 residential units on a modified grid street road pattern, which also includes open space, institutional, and commercial land uses. And the Stafford Woods subdivision was approved by the OMB in March of 2009. This zone change application is similar to the one that you've heard just previously for the Mattamy subdivision that Julianne spoke to. And it proposes to alter the residential zoning regulations on lands zoned R4, R6, I1, C2, and C1 relating to residential building side yard and rear yard setbacks, corner lot widths, building height, and to facilitate the implementation of new and varied housing forms such as back-to-back townhomes. And that these new regulations will result in improved design flexibility and land efficiencies, which will facilitate a more compact urban form, enhanced architectural articulation, provide for porches and verandas, varied roof lines, which together will create a more attractive, lively, and inviting streetscape. And that the next three photos will kind of highlight this. So this very first photo here is in the plan just north of Stafford Woods. It's multifamily, and I'm sorry it doesn't show up really well in this photo, but there's verandas and there's porches located here. And then in the second photo here, it shows some architectural variety of homes that each one is different and unique. And then the third one here is from the Mattamy subdivision, actually, because I really do like this picture. It's, again, showing the height variation and articulation. Again, it breaks up the homogeneity that we often see in many of our suburban areas with varying heights and the various articulation that's shown there. In terms of community engagement, I did receive some responses from the Moorland Crescent residents. Moorlands Crescent is located on the northern fringe of this. It sort of interfaces with this development. There were a handful of residents that were concerned about the new regulations. We met with them, and what we've done is we've agreed to eliminate the zoning regulations to the lots that would interface with these existing lots. They were happy with that approach, and we all agreed with that, and it was positive. So just some highlights and conclusions that staff is recommending approval for the following reasons: that it obviously conforms to policy, it supports the city's urban design initiatives and direction, which is very important. This is a comprehensively planned set of regulations rather than going through a piecemeal approach that is through dealing through C of A applications. These regulations have been tested. Our transportation folks are happy they don't pose any safety or visibility risks to both vehicular and pedestrian traffic. Does not affect on-street parking. Does not affect the width of the boulevard right-of-ways as originally approved, thereby not compromising street treat planning. There's a minor increase in the overall number of units. Again, keeping in mind it's a 1,500 unit subdivision. They're estimating 7 additional units by this. And I think most importantly, what I like about these regulations is it provides flexibility. It promotes a variety of housing types and styles in a more compact urban form that are considered very compatible and desirable in this area. So for that, staff is recommending approval of the zone change. I'd be pleased to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Afterwards, thank you, Mr. Bateman. I'm sure there will be plenty of questions. But first, if Mr. Burton wants to come forward and make his presentation. And Mr. Burton, as you know, you have 5 minutes to make your presentation. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee staff. I'm appearing on behalf of Activa Holdings, Inc., and we support the planning staff recommendation. We'd like to thank Mr. Bateman for his care and thought throughout the process. I would confirm the planning staff advice to you that what is before you with respect to this application is very similar to what was just endorsed by committee with respect to the Mattamy and Monarch subdivision, which is within the same sub-watershed. I would confirm that no additional uses are proposed. The intent really isn't to up the overall unit count. Mr. Bateman noted a potential of 7 additional units over a total of 1,500. What we're really trying to do is address and deal with the marketplace to provide additional flexibility in terms of design, to provide for front porch living, and to provide for some variety in design, and importantly to look at the inside design and how it translates to the outside. And by that, the consumer is really demanding more volume, additional ceiling height, and as a consequence, the minor adjustment in building height that's proposed. I would note that what staff are doing is coming forward with a comprehensive set of regulations dealing with a form of housing that is permitted, but which really wasn't dealt with through the zoning regulations, and that's the back-to-back towns, which you would see in the Mattamy subdivision in the Rosenberg community. As Mr. Bateman had indicated, there was some community response. We did, together with staff, have an informal meeting with the neighbors, and in response to concerns that were raised, there is transition with respect to the implementation so that the lots that back onto the Moreland Crescent existing homes are not subject to the proposed special regulations that are before you this evening. So we thank staff. Just a couple of points maybe to address some of the issues that were raised. In response to Councillor Yanetsky, there's no guarantee that there won't be variance applications, but the intent of the application is to put before Council comprehensively a set of regulations that will deal with matters comprehensively and avoid the need for multiple minor variances, which Council would really never see. With respect to the technical issues raised by staff, the comments from Mr. Mayor do predate the planning staff recommendations. Mr. Meyer has confirmed corner lot widths and driveway locations, which he found appropriate, and they've been incorporated within the amending zoning bylaw, which is before you. And with respect to matters associated with infiltration, water quality, and monitoring, I would confirm Ms. Von Westerholt's opinion to you that there are detailed conditions of draft plan approval that deal with pre-development, during development, and post-development monitoring. There's financial securities required of the developer to make sure that that occurs. And then, of course, there's the system-wide monitoring, and we're active participants together with the Conservation Authority, City of Kitchener, and the Regional Municipality of Waterloo. So we believe that the issues that have been raised are being dealt with, and we support the planning staff recommendations before you. And in conclusion, we'd just like to thank Mr. Bateman for his efforts throughout.
Okay.
Be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Britton. There are some questions. Councillor Janetsky?
Thank you, Mr. Britton, for coming in and making your comments on this application. And I know you made reference to me in regard to the previous application, and I appreciate that, and that's why I want to sort of go on this. And of course, this application here also has the variety of special regulations on setbacks and side yards and rear yards, etc., similar to the others. Yet I somehow note that there seems to be many more than the previous one, than the other previous application, just taking a review of it. By looking at that, does that give me some sense of assurance that because there are more regulations seems to be addressed here, that there will be no further applications to the Committee of Adjustment? Hopefully not, because you've sort of addressed it and everything. I'm assuming you're happy with this, because that's why you're here.
We're very happy with the recommendations before you. I can't stand here in all honesty and say there will never be a minor variance application that's submitted to the Committee of Adjustment, but what I can certainly assure committee and council is that the regulations which are before you deal with matters comprehensively, and the need to go to the Committee of Adjustment to vary the bylaw is significantly diminished, if not eliminated. But again, I can't say there will never ever be an application to the Committee of Adjustment, as Ms. Barrisdale couldn't and as planning staff can't.
And I understand the planning process, and I understand your answer.
I appreciate that, but to assure you, the intent of this application is to deal with matters comprehensively and to minimize the need to go to the Committee of Adjustment.
And the only reasons I raised, as I pointed out, is previous applications in other lands. I look in the paper, and all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of applications by some builder or 30 lots for reductions for whatever they are. The one other question I have in this, it rather puzzles me, is that it's, again, a special regulation for minimum rear yard, 0 meters, like no backyard at all, period, back to back. Like, could you explain how that works?
Certainly, what happens is it's similar to the Mattamy plan in Rosenberg. The form of housing would really be, technically it's a multiple residential dwelling. It's just you don't have the horizontal division, it's divided vertically. So you would have townhomes fronting on a street that are sort of joined at the rear and at the side, and they front on streets. So that's why they're called back-to-back, because they're connected at the rear wall, and hence the 0-foot rear yard.
So these are 4 units, sort of combination blocks?
It could be 4, could be 6. 6 is the typical combination.
Okay, so like quadruplexes or sexplexes sort of scenarios?
Correct.
Okay. All right. No, it just sort of caught my eye. 0 yards. I thought so. From that, what you described, those 4 units or 6 units, they have no backyard. Period.
Correct, and that would be the same as an apartment building, as an example, where there technically aren't rear yards because all the units are contained within a building. This is just another form of apartment. It's just there isn't the horizontal division where you've got units above. There's the vertical division at the rear wall.
So the objective then is, knowing that if anybody wants to use outdoor amenities, they can go down to the local park down the street and use it that way, more or less?
That in combination with front porches, and that's exactly it. And the other intent is with the back-to-back towns, the intention is to have an enhanced streetscape, so you've got your units fronting onto to streets as opposed to, perhaps the rear wall of an apartment building facing a street. So it provides for an enhanced streetscape, and as Mr. Bateman has indicated, is consistent with the policy in terms of front porches, eyes on the street, that sort of design philosophy.
So with that answer, my final question, with the front porches, that's sort of their outdoor amenity area, sort of speaking. So if they want to barbecue, stuff like that, they would do there. But I don't think barbecue is permitted on balconies.
I don't know if they are or not. I can't answer that.
And that doesn't deal with the zoning issue. Okay, because I was just trying to think,
Yes.
you want to eat, barbecue, where else do you do it, Thank you very much.
And no different than stacked townhouse, Councillor Janetsky. Typically, one may have access to green space, but the other one is on top, so it would utilize the porch. Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you. When I look at the zone map, Mr. Britton, on page 4-6,
yes.
So in conjunction with Councillor Netsky's questions, what I'm seeing here is that Area 2, and there's a number of different of Area 2s, those are the areas that you're talking about that will be those sort of block of townhomes, or because one of them is adjacent to a park near the top of Thomas Lee, I think it is. Sorry. Blair Creek. Sorry, Blair Creek. And then Area 2 on tall grass. Are those all going to be the same kind of product?
Would have the same kind of zoning, not necessarily the same kind of product. The R6 zoning category does permit a range of housing types, and what's being added to this as an offering to the public would be the back-to-back towns. So in the R6, the Area 2 zoning category, the intent is to make provision for the back-to-back towns in addition to plex units, walk-up units, singles, semis, street fronting towns, and cluster towns.
Okay. In one of the comments that, this may have been addressed because this comment was from August the 9th. In that comment, your Mr. Siobhan states, and this is on page 4-25, as a result, it is anticipated these local roads would have very low volumes of traffic, thus not creating significant conflicts or safety concerns with stationary vehicles related to corner lot driveway locations. I'm taking a little bit of concern here when you're saying safety concerns, low volumes of traffic. Okay. Because if I'm looking at I-1, that's going to be the school.
Yes.
You've got some fairly intensive development happening there with multiple units, which would indicate to me you're going to have significant traffic volumes coming down around Thomas Lee in front of the school, and then down past Blair Creek. Now there's Park P1 and P2, which will, I'm concerned about this being a raceway. Yes. Out. Have you thought about proactive traffic calming on that section of street that's connected to the school? Because I'm concerned that in a few years we're going to hear the same thing we hear in front of all the schools, and that is, we've got cars backed up, we've got people driving crazy because they got to get to the 401 after they've dropped off their young children. Mm-hmm. This is the opportunity for you as a developer and your client to be proactive and put in traffic calming now. Is that something that you have discussed?
Yes, we have, and with respect to the collector road network, it was the subject of a municipal class environmental assessment, and as part of that process, there were requirements to proactively consider traffic calming measures. So traffic calming has been incorporated within the engineering design. Certainly, I can speak to Blair Creek Drive, and then. What I would ask you to do is refer to page 4-19, and this is the comments from Mr. Meyer to Mr. Bateman, and those comments were received obviously subsequent to Pierre's letter. I think Mr. Meyer was referring to two circumstances. There's where you've got a road intersecting with a major road such as Blair Creek Drive, in which case he's identified one set of safe sight distance and distance separation from the corner. And then the other situation would be where you can see, say, for example, Tallgrass Street, where it's a crescent, and that would be the local street situation referred to by Mr. Chauvin, where technically on the inside corner of the crescent, that would be considered to be a corner lot. So in that situation, Mr. Meyer has made a distinction between a road intersecting with a busy road versus the inside of a crescent, and has established two standards for the driveway separation from the corner. And then how that's being handled by Mr. Bateman is he's taken that recommendation in those two circumstances and then incorporated into the amending zoning bylaw.
Okay, I really appreciate your clarification, and I had highlighted that section as well. So I just wanted to really direct my focus at this time on that stretch of Blair Creek just past those streets, and ask that you build that in to do traffic calming now.
Yes,
so when I drive down that street, I'm going to see narrow roadways and pedestrian islands and those kind of things to make sure that our children can cross safely into those park areas. Okay,
correct.
Good. I do have another question, but I know my time is up.
Yes, it has. Yeah. I wanted to let you finish your thoughts. So. Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. I would just have one question about the front porch culture that you've mentioned. Maybe that's becoming a bit of a buzzword, I'm not sure. But as a downtown representative, we have a lot of downtown, porch culture with big porches that people use to gather on. But the porches in the pictures that I'm seeing are comparatively small. So I'm just wondering what's the intended use of the porches that
Sure.
you're building?
And I can't speak to the anatomy pictures, but I did want to raise one thing with respect to one of the issues that was raised is the example in terms of the garage and the porch. That was an unusual circumstance because it was a front walkout scenario rather than a rear walkout. So in other words, the grade was picked up by having the garage underneath and then the porch above. There are some design guidelines that were prepared, and Mr. Bateman can speak to the zoning bylaw, but there's certain ratios with respect to building facade width relative to driveway width, and where there's to be a porch so that the projection of the garage is no closer than the front porch, and all intended to give some meaning to front porch living. So, and then there's a variety of lot widths as well. So there's no doubt that some of the smaller lots will have smaller front porches and some of the bigger lots will have bigger front porches.
Okay.
And, but from a design perspective, the zoning bylaw does speak to the ratio of building facade relative to garage, and then addresses the issue of garage projections relative to veranda and porches.
Okay, I understand that. That's great. The placement of the porch is at least parallel to, if not in front, or maybe it is actually in front of the garages. I'm not sure, but yet, what do you do on those little porches? Like, what do you do? Just stand and knock on the door? It's not for sitting around and hanging out, is it?
In all frankness, with respect to a townhome type of development, because the width of the unit is typically 5.5 to 6 meters.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be an entry into the home.
Yeah,
you know?
okay, that's fine. Just asking.
That's just the nature of that type of housing.
I think for me, front porch living means something different than for the way it's being used in this context, but that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Fernandez, you have a question of the delegation again, or staff?
Yep, delegation.
Okay.
I wanted to make sure that one of my counterparts had an opportunity. I just wanted to clarify what you said, that you've been an active participant, not you specifically, of course, but your client and your firm, active participant in the monitoring and related to the Upper Blair Creek watershed and all of the regulations that were set out by the OMB,
Yes,
right?
correct.
Okay. When Ms. Van Westerholt answered my question, she said the site monitoring will be through development charges, but once those development charges, once you've paid them, they're done. You have no further responsibility financially to the the overall site monitoring of what has been developed and built out in that area, do you?
Yeah. Well, just to clarify, I think what Ms. von Westerholt had indicated is the system-wide monitoring is paid for through development charges, and the development charges are collected from the city as a whole, not specific to this community. So there's an ongoing source of development charge revenue to pay for that system-wide monitoring. With respect to the site-specific monitoring, there's the pre, during, and post-development monitoring with ongoing monitoring required. I believe it's to at least 90% build-out of the development, and prior to release of security, certainly the most important aspect of that is with respect to the stormwater management. So before the city accepting the stormwater management facility in its ownership, everything needs to be properly inspected, appropriate monitoring reports, and prior to LCs being released as well. So there's...
So that doesn't matter whether it's 2 years out or 5 years out or 10 years out?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Because we recognize we're getting close to completing a lot of our greenfield development, and I want to make sure that that responsibility still continues with the development industry.
Correct, it does, through DCs, yes.
Okay, that's all I need to hear. Thank you.
Okay, any questions of staff? I see no questions of staff. Can I get them? Yes, go ahead, Councilor Fernandez.
Just a quick question, and this may have all been put to rest. On page 4-23, Mr. Graber and Mr. Malcolm at the time had listed some concerns with regard to our gas meters and such with the reduced setbacks. Has that been addressed?
Mr. Bateman.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it has. Yes, so.
Okay,
I mean, there's always ongoing challenges with sites in terms of the servicing, but yes.
Okay,
I mean,
I can see where there may be some problems if people are putting fencing down one side between two properties, if our staff can't get in there and do some monitoring because it's too tight and there's not enough room, and then you've got snow collecting. But you're positive that our utility staff will be able to get out there and...
Well, as far yes, that has been satisfied,
Okay.
Councillor.
I'll call you when I get the first email from the resident. Thanks.
And I'm sure there will be too. So okay, thanks.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Yeah, I'll just move the recommendation.
Okay, the recommendation has been moved. Sure, again, I don't typically have to ask for people to give comments. If you want to have comments after it's been moved, please ring in. So if I see there's no one in queue, then I will call the question. Otherwise, I will go as listed. Councillor Janetsky.
Yeah, just briefly, I'm prepared to support this application. I know staff have always worked hard with the development industry and they with staff to resolve all the issues, and I think they're coming straight forward with a good plan of subdivision that addresses all the issues. And the only red flag, and I'm meaning a red flag that I wanted to raise that from the questions I asked, is with regards to the special regulations that have been identified here, and I know staff is doing the zoning bylaw review, and it has a certain establishment, but then, of course, when you get into the specifics of the subdivision, you tweak it a little bit with special regs that have to be applied depending on building style, etc. But, you know, like I hate to see, you know, further stuff going to committee of adjustment that doesn't even come here. It's done by a separate thing, and the development industry knows that, well, if we get this approval, then we can go to the next one and get further approvals here, and staff will support us, and that's my record. And that seems to be diluting the intent of proper planning that was initially intended through the original revisions and consideration of the zoning bylaw. So I just want to give staff an alert from where I'm coming from on this, because somehow I see there's a dissolution of it over a period by going to different committees. But if you keep that in mind, then I'll be happy.
Councilor Fernandez.
Thank you. I know that staff and I met beforehand, and I had indicated fairly good support around these two applications. But you have to recognize once I start reading the letters and the input, not only from the residents, but also from our staff, that I'm going to have further questions and concerns. My ongoing concern with any of the development that was part of the OMB appeal process and is now bound by those conditions is I always want to know that those conditions are being met at the highest level possible. When I see spacing between houses, which leaves very little room for the rain to fall on ground and to be infiltrated into the ground and keep that water quality quantity where it should be, I'm going to raise concerns. So I feel that at least by raising it publicly, I've got some confidence that the monitoring will continue. Mr. Britton has assured me that he sees that this is part of their responsibility as well, and I really appreciate those comments. As long as I'm ward councillor, I'm going to continue to be nagging about this, so I just want to give you that heads up. I think it's critical and important to the watershed that's there and to our Roseville Swamp. We do get a lot of our drinking water from those aquifers. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzola? No? Okay. There are no other comments. I'll quickly make mine. I think this is an example of, kind of complete communities. Some of the concerns ongoing that we have seem to be reflected through the report and the guidelines as they evolve and change. It's kind of exciting to see a kind of diversified array of housing stock, encouragement being given to front porch living as the new terminology, as well as more streetscape fronting homes, as well kind of creative house design with higher peak, maybe reaching or slightly surpassing the height limit that would be allowed in that zoning, which is good. I think we need to have that creativity in our neighborhoods, but not related to this, but as a comment as whole, I think that has to be consistent. When we look at our infill as well, and we're currently in process in looking at guidelines and that, we can't be too contrary to what we're recommending in greenfield development. I think we have to be consistent in encouraging similar type of development formats. So based on that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. I'm going to call a 2 to 3 minute recess. I think we all need it, and then we'll get to the next item. Get your own water. That's all right. All right, let's reconvene the meeting. We've dealt with number 6 for 87 Victoria Street North. Number 7, zone change application, city initiated annual zoning bylaw update to the zoning bylaw 85-1. Staff want to bring that forward? Sure.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. I'm here to present the annual zoning bylaw update. The proposed bylaw consists of minor updates, clarifications, corrections to the existing zoning bylaw that have mainly been discovered by staff through day-to-day use of the bylaw. All of the changes are in your package, and should you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Councilor Gazzola?
I would like to move the recommendation.
Sure, when it's ready. Councilor Janetsky?
Yeah, just item number 3, shipping containers, I guess to be used as residential containers. Is there no minimum floor area for a residential unit, as that would be as classified as?
Through you, Chair, do you mean these shipping containers are more like people would use when renovating their house? We want to restrict them being in a driveway, let's say, for more than 30 days. So there's no minimum area or maximum.
So what Mr. Mancini had earlier, about 80 square feet would be acceptable, or actually even go smaller, as long as you get a cot in there, that would be sufficient of 25 square feet?
I think this is related to storage.
Yes,
correct?
yeah, this is more storage, Councillor Jeanette.
Oh, this is storage?
Yes.
Well, it says in residential areas.
Right, we're trying to restrict someone perhaps using a sea container as storage permanently in their backyard, let's say. So this would restrict it to a 30-day maximum on the property.
Okay.
So staff discourage having allow stay in storage.
So this is a similar thing that the problem Mr. Gazzola has in his... Okay, I see. No problem, but what?
Keep moving.
Just keep moving. I know, you just can't get to his wine there as fast. Okay, see, I thought that was something, but you're talking shipping containers. But is that really a shipping container, or is that really one of those containers for collecting junk? Or is that really the same thing? Because I had the same problem in my ward, and it was not classified as a shipping container, though it looked like it, but it looked more like a junkyard, not a junkyard, but where you dump junk and stuff like that nature.
Through you, Chair, we have defined shipping container as a vessel commonly or specifically designed for transportation of freight, goods, or commodities, and shall include but not be limited to cargo containers and truck trailers. So it could sometimes be full of junk, but it's specific.
Well, that's basically when you're doing construction. I know in my ward, basically there was a fire in a garage. So of course you bring the container, you clean it out with the contractors, and then eventually it should be gone. So this regulation here, you're saying would apply anywhere on that lot.
Yes.
So like if he's got a problem in his backyard in his ward, and I got a problem in my front yard with the driveway, that would apply there to address it. And you're saying 30 days?
Yes, for anything that's from when the bylaw is approved forward, we can't go backwards.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But where does it say 30 days in the
It's page 7-6, item 9. The specific regulations are contained under the title shipping containers.
7-6, what line?
Item 9.
Okay,
on
gotcha.
The page.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilor Fernandez.
Yes, I'm just wondering if I need to declare a conflict on Kilburney Court on map 7-14. That's a zone change from institutional to, I don't live in that house, but I live on that street.
Staff wouldn't be able to make that assessment on your behalf. You have to come to the determination.
All right, I'll list that as a conflict. But I do have a question on items on Kilcarran Crescent. Are they're the same issue, are they not?
No, they're not subject to the same.
Okay, that's all.
Regulation.
Councilor Janetsky.
Another question. Just first, I just finally, you told me it's section 9, and I somehow missed it. Let me understand the way the wording here is that residentially in the zone, this is number 2, shall not exceed 30 days, except where it is used for construction material in a residential dwelling. And that is fine. And that's the problem I had, because it was construction material from a garage that had, there was a fire in there. Insurance people came in, the contractors came in to clean it up, and the garage and the container just stays there. And it stayed there for months, and nothing was happening, yet it still was construction material. So how do you address the time frame? Because they weren't doing anything on it, and they couldn't care less. They just left it there for months, and zoning enforcement couldn't do anything about it. So I appreciate that if there is an issue and they are working on construction material and they're fixing it up and removing it, that's fine. I have no problem with that. But if it's just going to sit there for months and nothing's happening, that's the problem, and that's when the residents get all upset. So how will you deal with that?
Through you, Chair. Perhaps it's that wording. This is construction material for residential dwelling. It means if they were to get a building permit for it to be used for residential use, like habitate it, similar to Mr. Messidi's proposal earlier. That's undersized. So this is the reference to construction material in this paragraph is referring to a building permit. It has to be obtained for it to be lived in. And not just because it's construction.
So they need a building permit.
If it
No,
were-
no, Councillor Snetsky is referring to the time. He's saying, what's the remedy if they surpass the 30 days as outlined in the amendment?
And then enforcement, if enforcement gets a complaint, they would enforce.
So now someone could complain, Councillor Snetsky, and after the 30-day period, they could get fined or whatever the recourse is through bylaw.
I don't think it addresses the issue. Can we talk about that this week? Because this is just going to go to council for next Monday.
Della, you might have some.
Yeah, through you, Chair. We can certainly discuss further if you would like, but maybe I'll just do one more crack at trying to differentiate. Cheryl's done a good job. I'll try once more. 5.32 Section 1 speaks to, I think, what you were speaking to, Councillor Yanetsky, about the containers that might be in the driveway for a short period of time when somebody's renovating and they need to put their garbage in the driveway. So we're saying there's a maximum of 30 days that can be there. The Section 2 is actually speaking to shipping containers that could be used as residential dwellings, but they would require a building code and have to meet all zoning and building requirements. So it's it's contained in one definition, but they're speaking to two different applications of a shipping container.
You still, okay, unless you pop.
I didn't read it that way, and even when I read it just now, I didn't catch it to mean what you're saying. I understand where you're coming from, and I'm not disagreeing with you. It's just, it didn't read that way to me, and I don't know whether it has to be tweaked some more or not, but I'd be happy to sit down with either of you this week for 20 minutes, whatever, and just try to tweak it, because I know my problem, and it's going to come back again, and I have nothing against people making renovations and cleaning up and doing, stuff like that, but if it just sits there and nothing's happening, that's the concern, and that's how I didn't know. So let's discuss it afterwards.
Okay.
Okay. There are no other questions. It has been moved by Councillor Gazzola. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And that too carries. Now we have a leftover item from earlier. The Ontario Municipal Board, OMB reform. Councillor Fernandez.
I'll move it at the appropriate time, but I have a couple of questions for Mr. Pernard.
Sure.
I understand that you attended the town hall meeting on November the 1st. So can you help me understand what the makeup of the stakeholders that attended? Was there a lot of planners there? Was a lot of consultants there? Was it the general public? Can you give us a sense?
Certainly. Through you, Mr. Chair, my impression was that the vast majority of those in attendance were members of the community at large. There were some professionals and some development interests who are familiar with the OMB process in attendance, but they were certainly in the minority.
Okay, that's good to know. As I wanted it to, it's really important that this be a broad sector comment opportunity. When I look at the purpose of the reform on page 3-2, it talks about the enabling, giving, supporting, promoting. Did they give any hierarchy to any of these items in terms of what they thought was more important than another one?
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair, there was no hierarchy stipulated at the town hall meeting. Also, the provincial document also does not stipulate a hierarchy. However, that section of the report does paraphrase the provincial release of the information package on reform, and I think I followed the order that they were listed under in the provincial documents.
Okay. In the discussions that you heard, did you get a strong sense of support for OMB reform? And was there, you have some great lists of all the questions that were asked. and so participants could answer those questions. But was there a theme that came out of that town hall meeting that you felt was being strongly put forward to the province?
Through you again, Mr. Chair. So essentially the format of the meeting was to assign people to different tables throughout a very, very large room. And each of the tables were given a reform section to work on and to discuss in sort of a breakout format, and then to report the results of the discussion. And because, you have tables of 6, 8, and so on, and you have one person reporting on behalf of the whole table, it's hard to actually quantify. But my general impression and, my gut was that the majority of the people speaking, or the majority of the people participating in those table discussions, were anxious to see some significant reforms.
Okay. The last question I have is regarding Appendix A, the qualifications for a member of the Ontario Municipal Board. When I looked through all of the criteria that they set out and skills and knowledge, I don't see anything pertaining. It says specific knowledge of laws, regulations, policies, procedures, and rules that are relevant to the tribunal. Are we clear that planning, full understanding of planning policy, environmental policy, and plan, like those are part of the skills and knowledge that an OMB member has to have?
So through you, Mr. Chair, and we did comment on this in our response to one of the questions that deals specifically with this matter, and that is that the current qualifications list is actually very general in nature and does not specify those things. It also does not specify a lot of other things that we also note in the report. So we actually offer that as a suggestion, that there would be some benefit in having people that have some form of knowledge of the areas that they're going to be adjudicating. Yeah,
and that's perfect. That was my fear, and that my understanding was in the past it has been way too much general knowledge, but not enough focus on areas that they're going to be adjudicating. Okay, that's great. I think that I'm sure that you've got a good array of comments going forward. And December 19th is the last date for comments.
So that is correct. If this recommendation is adopted by committee and then council, we would actually submit this report, which responds to the province's questions in the format that they have developed, as the corporate response. I have also encouraged, because I did conduct some roundtable with staff to pull together some thoughts, and I have encouraged staff to submit individual comments should they so choose. I will also mention that at the town hall meeting that I attended in Guelph, in addition to the breakout groups, which was the main piece of engagement that evening, they did encourage those in attendance to submit individual comments as well.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much, and I really appreciate you attending that town hall meeting on behalf of staff and on behalf of council and bringing that report forward. I think most on council know how passionate I am about OMB reform, and it was very clear that the abolishment of the OMB was not an issue up for discussion. So I think that should give everybody a level of comfort.
Take that as your comment as well?
That's my comment as well.
Good. Councillor Janetsky?
Mr. Bernard, thank you for the analysis of that meeting. I was going to go to it, but I had a couple of conflicts, and you can't be at 5 places at the same time. But anyways, I appreciate what I heard. A couple of questions. Was that session run by the government in terms of the politicians that are in power, or was it run by the members from the Ontario Municipal Board, the employees?
Okay, so it was actually run by the provincial government. It was hosted by two ministries, but the lead ministry was the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. There were senior officials from both the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and the Attorney General's office in attendance, and the opening remarks were made by an MPP who's actually playing a significant role in the rollout of this. So I actually can't remember specifically how he described his role, but he's got some kind of leadership role on the committee that has been struck to engage the community in Ontario.
Okay, appreciate that. And Councillor Fernandez's questions a handful of questions were similar to what I have, but there's one question that still I need to ask. When I look on page 2, the number of Planning Act applications that go to the OMB with minor variances, zone changes, consents, official plans, subdivisions, and you sort of lay out by the numbers on that page 2. And of course, the largest number are minor variances. And these are the ones that we don't even deal with here at Council. They're all done by a special committee. And I'm just wondering whether there was discussion on that, whether minor variances should be, something happened that they don't need to go to the OMB, that the decision be made by Council, because of the 5 sections, the variances are the smallest of importance, as opposed to official plans and subdivisions and zone changes, that they seem to be taking up the majority of the OMB's time. Any discussion on that by the group?
Sure, there was actually discussion of that at the meeting that I attended in Guelph, but also there's a question in that the province does ask and we respond to in this report that talks about matters that currently go before the board that maybe should not go for the board. And they ask for our opinions on that. And Committee of Adjustment matters is one that surfaced high on most people's list at that public forum in Guelph, but it's also one that we do mention here in the staff report. So staff do believe that matters before the Committee of Adjustment with all the other package of reforms should not be going to the Ontario Municipal Board. But we also present some thoughts on turning the question around, the question that the province has asked, and the way that we think the question should be asked is under what conditions and what type of situations should go to the board, rather than starting to eliminate things that possibly should get taken away from going to the board. So we actually throw that out there.
Yeah, and that's a good approach to take. So thank you very much. I don't have any further questions, but then I'm prepared to support the report.
Great. Those are all the questions, and the item has been moved by Councillor Fernandez. I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. That is the last item of the committee. So committee adjourned.